Oh, hello, world. Welcome to Comic Book News. I am your old pal, Dan Shaheen. Today it's a little bit different. I know you're used to seeing me live, talking with my guests, being able to chitter-chatter back and forth to them. But today, the great cartoonist Bill Willingham would only appear via Zoom because he's had some technical problems with StreamYard and other fancy, newfangled communication techniques. He describes himself as a complete Luddite. And, I probably wouldn't have done this for everybody, but for Bill, I'm such a huge fan of his comics. If you know this channel, you know I really like the Elementals. You can check out my video about Bill's series, but today I'm going to dig in down and dirty and ask him the questions that I always wanted to. So stick around and talk to Bill Willingham. I'll be back at the end for a little outro thingamajig, so see you then. Okie doke. Hey, Bill Willingham. Welcome to Comic Book News. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm glad to do it. Thanks. I feel welcome. Where is Comic Book News? Where are you hosting from?
Well, Comic Book News is really, it's everywhere. It's a state of mind more than anything, to tell you the truth. But I'm in Arcata, California, in Humboldt County, if you've ever heard of it.
No one's ever heard of Humboldt County because it's, too humble.
Right. Actually, the guy it's named after there's so many hundreds of things named after him. He was such a famous superstar scientist. But now nobody really knows his name. It's sad.
It's good to be named Humble and have everything named after you. The universe likes to get playful once in a while.
Well, yeah, and you're our Willingham for today on this interview. But I don't usually do my interviews in front of the Fantagraphics bookshelf like this. I usually take them somewhere else.
We're
going to take them inside the Batcave, where we get up close and personal with the pros, and we talk about all things Bill Willingham. And Bill, I hope you're not going to be too offended. I really want to talk a lot about your old stuff. I'm sure you get dudes all the time that walk up to you with shirts like this, from this era, and want to talk your ear off about the Elementals. And I definitely want to do that. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. We can go anywhere you want to go.
Cool. I want to talk about it all. I really want to talk about where you started back in the role-playing world. It wasn't until after I read your comics, I went back and I started noticing in like Player's Handbook or Dungeon Master's Guide, certain illustrations that I guess were by you. And I see you have a long history with TSR.
Yeah. Only a short history, 1 year formally. But in that year is when we started doing those back of the comic books D&D ads, and I continued after I left TSR to go make my break into comics. I continued doing those ads. So yeah, a long history, some enduring friendships from back then. And it was I guess you could fit more into a year back then, because there sure was a lot of stuff that happened in that like era packed year.
It seemed to be a pretty significant year, but you didn't stick around too long. It was comics really your first love, and it was just like that's what got into role playing, the world role playing for the illustrations, and wanted to move into comics, or did you have a preference?
Well, yeah, when I was in the Army, I was stationed in Germany, and we were doing a lot of D&D playing on my Substack, and I want to encourage people to go join my Substack, which is a newsletter, and it's called These Foolish Games, and I want you to sign up. It's free. I explained some of my history of playing D&D almost around the clock for about a year, to the point where when I finally joined TSR and had my welcome to the company interview with Gary Gygax, he said, I was trying to find out how he could go on about no player could possibly be higher than 7th level and not be a Monty Hall DM. And we had 19th, 20th level players, and we thought we were doing it correctly. So I asked him about it and explained it, and he couldn't find any way we could until I explained how much we did, that we were playing round the clock for a year out in the towers. While we were supposed to be protecting nukes from falling into the hands of the godless, we were actually just playing D&D on the landlines. But in any case, he said, and I cherished it for a while, he said, "Oh my God, you guys might have played more D&D than any human beings in the world," which I thought was pretty cool and had a swagger for a bit. Nowadays, that some campaigns have been running more than 40 years. That can't be the case, because me and the old Army D&D gang, all went our separate ways. But I forget if there was a question in there. But yeah,
well, it's interesting. While we were talking TSR, it's interesting you brought up Substack. I wanted to bring that up too. It's all the rage right now. Everybody's hopping on there except for Ed Brubaker. So what are your feelings on it as a platform for comics? I'm really enjoying your emails. I read the TSR story and really liked it, and it actually got me back in touch with you to be able to make this interview happen. So I really think I can understand how it's great for engaging fans and in that way. But what about as a storytelling medium?
Well, I don't judge online platforms by any other criteria other than, does it work? Does it help you get on and write what you need to write and tell the stories you need to tell, or does it prevent you from it? I joined Patreon early on to try and do substantially what I'm doing on Substack. And Patreon was terrible at importing blocks of text in. There were formatting errors, and then you would have to painstakingly go through your thing, re-edit it from the ground up to format it to Patreon's exacting needs. And while you're doing that, by the time you get to the end, it was making changes again and reformatted. It was just terrible. And the reason is that Patreon, like many things, was created in a post-literacy society. We do videos, we do short descriptions below videos, which is more than enough that the text tool needs to be used for. It did not anticipate that there were actually people who both wrote and read and actually enjoyed it. Finally, in frustration, I gave them a Dear John letter, and like, this is why I'm leaving, and this is what you should have addressed long ago. So I entered Substack hesitantly because it was a very similar situation. But so far, they seem pretty good. They have a few formatting quirks. We have lost our ability to indent paragraphs, apparently. Apparently that's a antique of a past age. Yes. Now, because online text, you do a paragraph by having a break of an inch or so between paragraphs, and so you don't need to indent to indicate that a new paragraph has begun. I hate this. I hate this with the passion of 1,000 suns, but that's what we're stuck with. Even to the extent of I do novels self-published now because the lovely prose publishers, all of whom wanted a book from me when Fables was at its height. Any book. I mean, some of them said, "Look, just send it to us. We'll publish it." They are not that interested in me anymore. Anyway, self-published. I can't do all the formatting and things like that it takes to make it comply to, you know, Amazon and Kindle and this and that. So I farm it out, and there's services that do that. This latest one sent the novel back to me with the breaks between paragraphs, because that's what people do. That's the new standard. And I could not, she lived in some other country. I never quite pinned it down, but I could not get them to understand what I wanted, which was a book that still looked like a book with the normal spacing between lines, and you indent to show that a new paragraph had begun.
Bill, your criteria are so exacting. For the people at home, that's why this is a pre-record. We couldn't use our normal streaming platforms. And because Bill made a demand, he issued it on his Substack. He will not do anything other than a Zoom interview.
Because it's the only thing I know how to make work. I got tired of having technical difficulties during live streams, which I think are, it's interesting, you know, the era of live TV and live radio is back now.
Yes.
But it's for young kids and whippersnappers that can work that stuff out. I have my head full of too much stuff now, and almost full of anything that's ever going to be there. While I can tell you every place that Tarzan has ever visited in the books, not the movies. The movies are crap. I could sing for you if you needed to know it. Not just the opening credits, but the end credits to Peter Potamus. That's the kind of crap that's in my brain. I can name all the Herculoids. I can, you know, the important stuff that's in there is not going to make way to learning new stuff. So I'm done. And by accident, because I do continue to play D&D with a bunch of guys, all of whom are removed from me because I won't tell them where I live. So I had to learn this Zoom thing in order for it to happen. So by default, that's it. Just like some of the best advice I ever got during the computer age of writing, and it's not all bad. Word processing has saved many a project with me. But they said, figure out the word processing program you want and learn it, and never learn another one. If you try and load too many on there, you're going to fail at doing many rather than succeed at one. Excuse me. So I think online streaming, whatever this is, I've learned one, and that's enough. And
okay, like I told you, that stack of Eisners behind you has earned you the right. And not to mention, you know, you've been one of the guys I've wanted to talk to the longest. One of my favorite videos that I did on my channel back before I even live streamed it, when I was just making videos, was all about elementals. And
right.
and I would really love to talk about that.
Sure.
I'd love to talk about, so after TSR, Texas Comics #1. What can you tell us? I know that some of the characters appeared in Villains and Vigilantes, some of the bad guys. But then where did Texas Comics #1 come from? And how did you get a Michael Golden cover?
Well, that interesting story, or maybe not. Here's the origin of the Elementals comic book. I was trying to break into comics. I entered TSR already with one foot out the door, saying that this is a way stop for me to do comic books. That's what I really want to be doing. And I was upfront about it. I didn't try and lie to them, and that led to a great lunch I had, where all the art department execs took me out to lunch at the local Lake Geneva Playboy Club to convince me not to leave the TSR art department, and they kept upping my salary.
So you moved to Lake Geneva to
Well,
do
yeah,
that?
that's
Yeah.
where TSR was at the time.
Okay.
So they upped my salary several times during the thing, which I thought was wonderful, and I wish they'd done it, earlier on. But one of my problems is that they kept the artwork. They stole the artwork, the original artwork, and insisted that they get to. Even things like Dragon Magazine. If there's something you'd painted before, and it's like, well, we want to use this in Dragon Magazine, I go, great. It's like, but we're going to need the original art, and it's going to be owned by us. The copyright.
That's preposterous.
It's preposterous, says I. Well, they wouldn't budge on that because the real execs up at the business side of TSR just insisted on, no, we get to have all the artwork. To hell with you guys. So we reached an impasse.
Wow.
I left TSR to go try and break into comics. I had been working on my samples during the entire year at TSR. I got some good feedback. Finally, saved a little money, flew myself out to New York and visited the offices, which is how you broke into comics back then, and had someone say, this is great stuff. We can give you work right away. I went back, quit TSR, moved to Long Island, New York, took the train into New York, said, I'm here. And they go, what? Yeah, who are you? Why are you here? I go, for my first job. It's like, you said we could get you work right away. I go, well, you deserve work, but yeah, we can't. You don't just show up and get work. The young lady that said this, and I believe she was somebody at the time, said, I can show your work to the editors who can assign you work, but since you now live in the area, you can do that yourself. So have a great career. So I'm stuck out in Long Island, not breaking into Marvel and DC. I keep doing, I'm living off of my TSR stock, which rose precipitously during that time. And I can, having been born and raised poor, I can stretch a nickel till it bleeds. So the cash in the stock lived a year off that while I worked on my samples. And when I was getting lots of promising, this is coming along from Marvel and DC, no offers, no work. So finally, I'm also visiting the Forbidden Planet comic book store in New York, which was excellent. Oh, one of the best of all comic book stores, except for I'll never darken the door again, because one trip in, when things were dire, they wouldn't let me use the restroom.
Oh no.
Employees only. And this was one of these things that horrible, embarrassing thing is going to happen if I can't. I was in physical pain, and I must have looked like some strung out junkie. I was in some, So I'm not sure that I blame them, but just by courtesy of humanity.
New York's a tough town,
They
Bill.
should have let me use the restroom. So yeah, I'll never go into a Forbidden Planet again. But anyway, Forbidden Planet carried a lot of the new independents then. Nexus from Capital, Whisper, which was briefly at Capital. Steve Grant did that. Noble Comics was doing Justice Machine.
Yeah.
First Comics had announced their existence but hadn't come out with anything yet, and a few other things, Specific Comics. So I went back to my hovel on Long Island and decided to do sample pages for that. And because I wasn't going to do new samples for every single one of these publishers, there was half a dozen at least, I would do sample pages to fit Marvel and DC because they wanted to see their characters. Actually, DC was open to seeing Marvel characters just to see if I knew what I was doing. Marvel wouldn't give me the same courtesy about DC characters. They didn't want to see it. That's when I first heard if you were good enough to work at Marvel, you'd already be working at Marvel, which is a catch-22 that I think perfectly fits the character of that company. But so I thought, all right, I'm going to do generic samples. I'm going to do a generic superhero team just to show these people that I know how to draw. And so I based superheroes based on the Elementals characters, because I just come from TSR. Elementals was one of my favorite groups of monsters to throw at people when I ran a game. So I did a group based on the Elementals, and sent them out. 2 days later, Mike Gustovich in Grand Rapids, Michigan, gives me a call. He must have gone to the post office, opened it up, looked at it, and called me right away. He says, "Come out here and do comics with us." So I left my carriage house in Stony Brook, Long Island, where I almost met. Now I'm spacing this. I'm having a senior moment. Where the Wild Things Are, the
Sendak.
Sendak. My landlady was a friend of Maurice Sendak. As a matter of fact, she ran a nursery school out of her old Victorian home that I was in the carriage house on the property, and had an original Sendak over the mantelpiece.
Wow.
And I said, "Look, if you're ever broken into and only that is missing, don't even bother with the police. I did it." But she was a garrulous, lovely woman, but who, if she stopped by to chat, I was not getting any work done that day. So one day I see her coming up the walkway with this kind of super hairy, roly-poly kind of Bob Hoskins bullet of a man. And I'm going, oh God, I can't do a conversation with her right now. So I hid when she knocked on the door. And it turns out she was bringing her friend Maurice Sendak to meet me. So I know this lovely artist on the property that you have to meet. So I missed my chance to meet it. Anyway, I left that place, got on a bus, rode to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Mike Gustovich, the head honcho of Noble Comics and the creator of Justice Machine, met me at the bus, and we took a little walk before I was going to camp in their guest room until I got an apartment. We took a little walk about what I would do at Noble Comics. And I was curious about that because he did Justice Machine. He was drawing that. He was starting a book called Cobalt Blue, and maybe one or two other things. He had plans and ambitions. So I said, well, which one of these is, what am I going to be working on first? I say to him, treating him like, a publisher. It's like, yeah, you make the assignments. And he had this kind of curious, almost hurt look on his face. What do you mean, what are you going to do? You're going to do that comic book you pitched us. The Elementals. I go, oh. And that's when I realized I was not just providing samples. I was actually pitching an idea for a comic book. So of course, having learned never to admit you didn't know how to do something, I said, oh yeah, of course, well, yes, I'll be doing that book. Yes, of course. But I meant, is there other stuff you want me to work on too? So anyway, that's how Elementals ended up at Noble Comics. They did the Justice Machine annual with the introduction of the Elementals in a 20-page segment in the back. Right at about the time that everything was...
You mean this?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Here we go. We're in the $1 million comics camp, by the way, here, Bill. And we'll be taking a look at some of your stuff today.
Well, can you open it? The back is when the Michael Golden version of Elementals. I've never drawn them as well as he did that one time. we were doing
Who
local
draws as well as Michael Golden, period, though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh, I wanted to be him when I grew up, but the problem was that I was trying to grow up, and he was dead set against that. But we would do local conventions, and he in the Grand Rapids area, we'd go down to Indiana and places. He would show up at those, so we got to know each other a little well. And one night, just out of the blue, Mike asked him to do this cover, and he said yes. They talked money. I'm not privy to how much Mike had to spend to get it, but the deal was it would be a pencil cover, and Mike would get to ink it.
That is a hell of a cover.
Isn't it? Isn't it great? So yeah, that was all.
And a wraparound to boot too.
Pardon me?
And a wraparound cover to boot.
Yeah. Yeah. Just terrific.
But where does, now you talk about Noble Comics, but what is Texas Comics? This is what I've never really understood the connection.
Well, with Noble Comics, I was there for a few months while we did this. And we would go to whatever conventions we could get to, and we kept running into this group of guys from Texas that were trying to get a company started. When Noble went under, and they went under by, well, we just, the way Mike would finance the issues of Justice Machine is he'd get a lot of work inking for Marvel and various places. As a result, I helped ink the very first issue of New Mutants because Mike inked it and I filled in blacks. But if you remember the black spotty guy, there was a lot of blacks to fill in. So anyway,
Sunspot.
Yeah, Sunspot. Mike would finance publishing his stuff with that work. So he was working himself, burning the candle at both ends. But we did all of this, and he sunk a lot of money into it. It's a much bigger than a single issue. And his wife.
Oh yeah, it's a nice thick. It's a nice package with a $2.95 cover price, which was a lot for back then.
A lot. Well, his wife realized that they were broke, and so she was ostensibly the publisher. She said, "We're closing down."
But it was a lot of comic for that.
The reason you're broke is
say.
You sunk all this money into this, and you haven't gotten it back yet because you got to put the book out now. To all of that comes back. But she was having none of it, you know. So Noble Comics was gone. So I was out of work again, and these guys from Texas got wind of it right away, called up and said, yeah, that thing you did, we just made a deal to publish the Justice Machine Annual with the Texas backup. And then we're gonna do regular series. So come down here and do it. So I did the same thing. I got it. This time I could afford to be on a plane, not a bus, but I came down to Houston, Texas. Went to the studio in the back of the Camelot Comics shop, and got to work again. So the Texas Comics published this, but it was all done for Noble Comics.
I see.
And that's how they
and
were.
Is this the intro pages that you made?
Yeah.
Are this story is the sort of generic intro pages that you did?
Oh no, the samples? No, I just did generic samples.
Okay.
I think I did them battling a bunch of guards at a docks trying to smuggle weapons into the country. I don't know whatever happened to those. I think they sold. But anyway, this is what Texas Comics published. They were able to afford to publish it because they didn't have to pay for the art a second time. Although industry standards, as I eventually learned, is they should have. But anyway, they published it and then went broke because they published it at a loss. They printed enough to try and make a splash, so that even if all of them were sold and paid for, and I think they were, they would still have lost money on it. not a good business plan, and then their financing fell through. That's when I learned the next small company I go work with, to make sure that as a condition of working, I examine the books. Do you guys really have financing? They claimed they did and didn't. They were hopeful it was going to come through, but it never did. So they got this much done. That's not true. They also got most of the art for the first regular issue done, but they went broke before they could put that out.
So talk about this a little bit here. I mean, how far in the future were you thinking about the plot of Elementals when you wrote and drew this issue? Because we're seeing some of like the most important players that would feature much later on in the series. Were you thinking about the longer game story from the very beginning?
Well, I'm not sure I was aware of it at the time, but during the Elementals, I found out that I work best if I'm doing an epic, a long-term story. There were things planted in issues of the Elementals that I sat on for years and then did a big reveal. You cannot make those kind of plans in Marvel and DC and just sit on something for a couple of years to let it percolate, and then do the da-da-da moment. I was able to do that with the Elementals. However, I'm not sure that I started with all of those plans. You'll note that the Elementals was accidentally created, as I just said, just so that I could have samples of superheroes. I needed villains for them to fight in the very first issue. I didn't have any, so I grabbed the ones I'd done for Death Duel to Destroyers, upgraded them a little bit, but it's essentially that. This was very seat of the pants type comics making. I was more than willing to act like I knew what I was doing, but I was making it up as I went along.
I mean, what did you think of the production wise? The color at the time just strikes me as very good for the time.
Pretty good, yeah.
Compared to what was coming out of Marvel and DC in the same years.
Yeah, there's a funny story. When this was the only thing done by Texas Comics, then it went to Comico. In one of the early Comico issues, we had Janet Jackson coloring it, not the one with the wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl, but a petite Texas girl who moved up to New York from Houston at the same time I did because she had met Jim Shooter. They were in love, and she was going to do coloring to afford to live in the area. So she colored the book, and I had very specific, do this, have them coming out of a gray sky, the helicopters, things like that. And we were showing it around up at Marvel, and some of the guys up there were saying, this is just wonderful looking. I mean, it takes you a moment to see that helicopters are coming out of the storm and all these color things. He goes, yeah, it's all wrong. I mean, it's gorgeous, but you're not allowed to put dark against dark. You have to put bright against dark. And so, you're not good enough to be at Marvel. I go, but you were just
brother.
Yeah, it's great. It's like innovative, but it's wrong. So, that was that. Once again, we were learning as we went along.
Okay, here's the Destroyers. Here's the rarely seen wraparound cover of Elementals #1. One of the things I loved about the series so much is the wraparound covers in both series 1 and series 2.
Yeah.
Seemed to be something that you were really into, but wasn't really common. Was that your decision, or was that the publisher's decision? Or
I probably asked for it and they agreed. They were working pretty hard to woo me over.
Well, and I'm also going to show here what I've got here is the first Elementals trade paperback. Now, another way, talk about Elementals being ahead of their time in so many ways. But I heard a lot of things about this trade paperback, maybe like, trade paperback overproduction in general being part of the reason Comico went down.
Not really. The reasons Comico went down is they overextended themselves. When First Comics launched, and I was riding and hitching rides from Grand Rapids to Chicago to try and break in there when Noble Comics unfolded. So I get lots of free lunches, and they eventually gave me some work at First Comics, just so that we can't afford to keep feeding you for free when you show up. But they talked about their philosophy as a company that I really liked. They said that, and this is before any of their books had come out. They said, we are a 6 comic book company. We will always be a publisher of 6 comic books, no more than that ever per month. The reason being that too many companies overextend themselves and they burn up their money. So if we want to start that 7th comic book, it has to replace one of the 6. Like, not everything we publish is going to fly. So we're going to always make sure that the 6 are as good sales-wise as they can be. And I love that conservative take. Then they had some real successes with American Flag and Star Slayer and various other things, and they threw that philosophy out the window. The smell of success, they were very much we're successful, we can do no wrong. And
I worked for a company like that. They said, we never want to get beyond 14 people, boutique firm. But when people are throwing money at you, you gotta take it.
Well, Comico, they never had the formal philosophy like that, but they were very much the same type. And then they got a little heady.
Talk about dark on dark covers. Come on, Bill. Don't you know this doesn't fly? Don't you know?
I guess I did it wrong.
These are beautiful. What I love about your wraparound covers too is that they always work very well as a single cover. It's not like a wraparound image per se.
Well, yeah, the front cover is the only thing we're going to see on the stands. It has to sell the book.
If even that, sometimes you only get half of the cover right at a good comic book store.
Yeah.
And here, some of the great stuff that, the game being so well thought out so early on, the idea behind it. And what I want to talk about is that you came from TSR. You obviously have a big love of fantasy and the occult, and Elementals really is not a superhero book. It really is it's almost a sci-fi superhero approach to fantasy. How do you look at it?
Well, that at least was intentional. It occurred to me when I'm trying to break into the business, and I have to ask myself the question, like, why do the things that work? With the best superhero stuff, it's that they are superheroes secondary to whatever else they were. Batman is a kind of a Pulp Fiction-y revenge story in superhero drag. Superman is an alien visitor. It's the Jesus or the Moses story. Take your pick. Thor is pure mythology fantasy, but in a superhero setting. Wonder Woman is Greek mythology. It's ancient warrior that also happens to be a superhero on the side. That's when they're at their best. The closer you can keep to your roots, the better it is. And when they stray too far from that is when the books get not so good. So I purposely decide, okay, what is the Elementals going to be? Well, I like fantasy. I like urban fantasy, which was still kind of young at the time. So it's going to be that. It's going to be magic based. One thing, there's not going to be this kind of crazy quilt of this guy's exposed to radioactivity, this guy's an alien, this one, tripped into a vat of chemicals. It's going to be one driving force that creates these things. Well, if there's one,
which is why I say it's really like a sci-fi approach, if you will, like where there's one thing that's different,
right?
Whatever.
So I went down that road purposefully, which is why a lot of fantasy elements keep showing up.
And it was just
in
a
the
great it was a great setup for a continuing series too, their first adventure. And then I don't want to spoil anything, especially because it's hard to find this stuff. It hasn't been reprinted as everything.
And
I mean, everything
nor will
else
it,
in that area
unfortunately.
has been.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to? I want to talk about that a little bit. We'll get
Okay.
we can get there to that sad story.
Yeah, but Elementals, you know, look, I was a kid. I couldn't draw as well as I wanted to. I couldn't write as well as I wanted to, but at least I could have some definite decisions of, well, since I control this, and no one can just say, no, you got to do this, you got to do that, whatever. For better or worse, I'm driving the ship. Let's see what I care about in storytelling, and it benefited, I think, because of that.
Oh yeah.
I would urge
Yes.
anyone doing their own work to just take some time and figure out what it is you want to do with the medium. The medium is not the message. You have to provide the message if there is one. You have to provide the interesting story, and God help you if you think you can, you know, jump on the bandwagon of whatever is popular now, because if the story's not interesting to you, you're not going to interest others. Readers are pretty adept at picking up the fact that this guy knows what he likes, knows what he's interested in, and also, and this is the absolute unforgivable thing, you better know where you're going with the story. If you don't, if you're going to pull a Lost kind of thing, readers will pick up on it pretty quickly and disengage. The reader is not the trailblazer. And so his attitude is and should be, if you don't know where you're going, don't count on me to guide you.
So one of the things though was you took so many superhero tropes as well. I mean, they were in there. They were almost, the characters are almost aware of them, but the use of celebrity and its effect, the personal depression of the characters. I mean, these are things that people talk about Tom King writing about today, or whomever, or the Authority being exploring mature reader superheroes. This stuff was decades before that.
Yeah.
Do you hear it cited as as much as it probably should be as the precursor to those sort of comics?
I am no authority nor the person to judge how much credit and or blame I should get. That's for others to decide. I just wanted to spin a good story as best as I knew how.
Bill, you did it. Some of the best of all time. The series itself was amazing, and when series 2, when the second series was launched, you can't imagine like how invigorating that was for me, because I wasn't around. Like, I was reading comics, but I wasn't reading them off the shelves from the early issues of the first series. It was the second series that sort of brought me on, and I had to go back and play catch up and explore the whole thing to see how all these puzzle pieces fit together. And I'm going to ask you again, without any kind of spoilers, I mean, you have a saga here that spanned from whatever, 1983, 4 to thousands of years into the future.
Yeah.
Were you planning out? Were you thinking from the very beginning of a
First of all, spoiler wise, you know, it's been out of print for 30 years. I think that spoiler ship, don't spoil things, has sailed.
Okay, fair enough.
I had a few long range plans, hoping they could, you know, pay off someday. The secret to getting away with long range plans is control your characters, make sure you're the guy in charge. and don't tell anyone. If you speak too candidly around other comics creators or anyone what you plan to do, it's only your fault if those good ideas show up elsewhere before you can get to them. But yeah, if you got a book that's going to be around for a while, you hope, go ahead and lay some long range things. The shapeshifter betrayal is what Dan is trying very hard not to.
I'm dancing around it, dude.
And
but you spelled it out. You laid it out in this issue.
I hinted at it in that issue. Yes.
Yeah, you made the only really oblique hint to it, and I just love the fact that the entire issue is an amazing dream that he forgets immediately at the end,
or claims to. I think he was lying.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's always been a keep his cards close to the vest kind of fellow.
Oh. I always thought he really just forgot it, like you sort of forget a dream immediately when you wake up.
But one of the reasons I wanted to do this when I did it was so that later on, if we could ever do the reveal years down the road, and it was years down the road, I could get proper credit saying, he had it set up all along. And sometimes I don't have it set up all along, but things pay off well. Sometimes I do.
Well, it worked so well, and just the hints and the amazing imagery in this as well, and just all the hints about Tommy's future. This is where we really get into the far future stuff too.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that, what's the old adage that if you play heroes, if they don't die soon, live long enough to become the villain. I guess I was highly influenced by doing stuff like that, where Paul Magdib was the hero of the first book, is definitely the villain by the third, and his descendants. Oh my goodness,
Hey, not to derail, Dune 2021. Did you see it?
Yes, I did.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Very pretty. They captured visually a lot of what I was hoping for in Dune. Even though he only did the first half of the book, somehow his spies amongst my household told him every one of my favorite bits in Dune, because he left every single one of them out. But so I'm about.
What's your favorite bit? I mean, Dune, I'm not into all the books, but the first I've read so many times and loved so much.
Well, here we're getting the spoiler territory, but the time span between the Atreides taking over Dune, Arrakis, and the Harkonnens making their move, it was too short. It was actually not that short. They had time to have some strategies, to remember the planned raid on Harkonnen's spice reserves. The meetings, the strategy of all of this is what compelled me. And because of that, you didn't get to see how much of Paul is in his father, or how much of Paul's father is in him. The decisive battle leader, the kind of guy that men would follow to their death because he's worth following. We didn't see that. We didn't see the all important formal dinner that everything that is about the culture and what's at jeopardy and what's at stake in the Dune universe is in that dinner, and he skipped over it.
Okay, Dune derailment done. But you love. I'm glad you brought up that you love the strategy of it, because I've always noticed in your books, especially including Fables and this, as well as besides the fantasy element, you seem to have a real love of that sort of military tactical strategy element. Like even in Fables, where they make the strategy of how to use the clouds and the beanstalks and things, it's very like strategically military oriented. Maybe
Well, there's a little, yeah. There are people that know much more about military strategies than I ever will, but I tried to be true to it. But in reality, it's the intelligent approach to what is going on in our lives. I tried to bring that to the Elementals. I dislike the fact that most superhero stories are totally reactive. We have no plan. We sort of hang around until something goes wrong, and then we rush in and try and fix it with, promiscuous thumping on faces. I wish there was more. Why are we doing this, and how do we accomplish what our goals are to superheroes? So I try to inject that. I would recommend any storyteller that wants to do action adventure type stuff, whether it's superheroes, urban fantasy, whatever. Watch a series called The Sandbaggers. It's not a BBC production, a British show. Took place during the Carter years, I think. Very low budget. You're going to have to work to find DVDs, but they exist. 3 seasons of the best espionage show ever done.
Oh.
They were blessed, and I don't say hampered, I say blessed with no budget. Because they had no budget and they couldn't do all the James Bond, flailing around out shooting guns and having things blow up, they did a story about what happens in the really dry and dusty and molding corridors of power, because that's where shit really takes place.
Yes.
The planning, the adage in special forces that the battles fought in the mess hall, meaning you're training, you're talking about what's going to happen out there, is what makes a successful battle, not trying to figure it out once you get into the middle of the crap. It is a perfect show for that, because they had to make up for no budget with just the best writing ever. Watch The Sandbaggers. The first thing you'll find out is that Greg Rucka has already stolen every good bit from it, so don't grab directly, but try and grab the philosophy, the kind of understanding of that. But many of the Elementals issues were kind of poo-pooed because, well, nothing happened in this issue, which meant, well, no thumping of heads happened, but it was all talky stuff, and that's because that's really what's interesting, and that's where the drama is taking place.
This was one 2-issue piece where that sort of middle management of espionage came into play, as well as with like psychic powers. I love the broadcast telepathy of his shared delusions. Some of your concepts were such unique takes on these superhero powers. Can you tell me where did Sanction come from?
Well, visually, in one of those, he shows up as a really distinguished looking black guy with like pearls around it, very well dressed. That guy showed up to a party in Philadelphia once. It was a party. I went to a lot of parties put on by students at the Philadelphia College of Art. So there was a pretty eclectic bunch that would show up to those. And he had such an interesting look. I said, "Can I take a few pictures and make a character out of you?" And he said, "No." So he only shows up in like one panel, but I did it anyway. Anyway, that started visually the ball rolling, and it's like, okay, what can this guy do? Well, he's not a get in there and punch it out against these really overpowered. I mean, the Elementals, their power set is such that very little should be able to defeat them. So it's got to be cleverness. It's clever and intrigue and all that, and that caused the thinking behind them. It's an old trope. I mean, you don't defeat Superman by someone stronger and faster. You defeat him with a big brain, so that's why we have the character sanction.
I just loved the concept of how he had multiple personalities unlocked by almost like a Manchurian Candidate style code words. And then whatever he thought he was, everyone around him would see him as. Was that that was the idea?
Yes. Everyone shared in his delusion because he was a broadcast telepath.
So, but if you took a picture of him, I was what you would get to see exactly what the real guy looked like.
Maybe. In Firestarter, the father character had a psychic ability to where at one point he handed a cab, he needed to go a long distance. He handed a cab driver a $1 bill, but he told him it was 100. And because he told the cab driver it was 100, he saw a $100 bill, and which is standard, psychic stuff. But later on, some agents get a hold of that, and every time they touch the $1 bill, they want to see a $100 bill again. It's amazing, isn't it? How powerful that suggestion is. And so, would the suggestion carry on to, even though the photograph would actually show the reality, would the people looking at it still see what the guy?
I didn't. Yeah, that's amazing. And is his power part of the Shadow Spear release too, or is the Sanction character predate that?
Look, it's all magic based, and one of the premises is that at this time in our history, this was in the early 80s, all of the magic, the reason the magic has slowly disappeared from the earth is that it's been stolen and bound up in this substance called Shadow Spear that was released as a big storm. So it's a traveling storm of pure magic, and it unlocks, releases all that kind of stuff. Everything that happens that is not absolute believable technology and magic is a result of the Shadow Spear beginning to leak magic back into the world.
And your main bad villain, Saker, Lord Saker.
Yep.
Now he has historical roots, and
yes,
I gotta say, Bill, this was one of the moments as a youngster when I read it. It shocked me.
You're welcome, or I apologize, depending on.
No, I loved it. I loved it. It's in a way that, like, I was raised Catholic, and I don't think of Jesus as, I never thought of Jesus as anything but a great guy, right? Or
it wasn't until this a little, I don't know that I was comfortable with it, but it started with a question, and the question was Lazarus. If there is an afterlife, was Jesus doing Lazarus any favors by raising him after he'd been in paradise for 3 days? By the way, while you're on that page, funny anecdote. I got dumped by the woman of my dreams about the time I was doing this.
Oh no.
Amy Kahn, she gave me my walking papers, deservedly so. And in a fit of pique, when I needed to show Jesus consorting with whores, threw her into the role. The funny thing was, it's just like, okay, got it out of my system, whatever. And it was a it was a wrong thing for me to do. There's no justification for it. Years later, 10 years, maybe more later, I'm snowed in Wisconsin, and the TV went out, everything went out, but the phone still worked. So I wiled the days until a snowplow could get to me, pretty much eating anything that was edible in the house and making phone calls because the phone still worked. So I said to myself, let's see how many people I can track down. This is before the internet. And I got Amy on the phone after all these years. She goes, "Oh, Bill, I haven't heard from you in however many years it was." And then the next thing she says is, "I saw the book." And I knew what she meant immediately. It never occurred to me that she would continue picking up the book after she'd given me the heave ho.
Oh,
Especially since spending too many long days working on that book and not coming home from the studio was one of the reasons she gave me my walking papers. But yeah, she said, "I saw the book. I saw what you did." And
hey, thank you for at least giving Jesus fairly reasonably dark skin and hair.
Yeah.
Appreciate that one.
In any case, yeah, when you use your comics to get revenge on people from time to time, it will come back to you.
So it was these kind of touches, this historical roots. And so, I mean, Saker is Lazarus.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially a biblical character, and he's cursed to this. So that just destroyed me as a kid, like not in the best way. Like it just shattered everything of that I had read, and I'd certainly never read a comic book like this, Bill. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome.
So now I'm gonna keep showing some elemental stuff. I want you to just tell us the sad story. Can you tell us who Andrew Rev is?
Andrew Rev, well, let's see. Comico overextended themselves. They were a successful company for 5 years. They sold books and turned a profit. They fell in love with themselves, as so many publishers do, in the sense that, well, now we can do anything. And they did some amazing stuff. They did.
Let's talk about what they published though for a second, just for a hot second, because Comico put out some of my very favorite comics of all time, not limited to Elementals. Matt Wagner's Matt Wagner's
Mage.
Man, the amazing Dave Stevens covers, even on the Johnny Quest comics.
Rocketeer, Johnny Quest,
Rocketeer, of
Gumby,
course.
Space Ghost.
The Gumby Summer and Winter's Fun specials, which I've covered on my show.
Wonderful.
My all-time favorite comic books ever. Okay, so they put out all this great stuff. They were the publisher's publisher. They're publishing guys that are now household names like Bill Willingham and Matt Wagner and Dave.
Depending on the household.
Well, around these parts anyway, your household name. So tell us, I'm sorry to interrupt, but tell us what happened to this beautiful thing that was Comico.
Well, listen, they were successful and they were making money, and they decided to be more successful and make more money. And they decided that, first of all, to sell more, they weren't getting distributor orders the way they thought. So they got into bed with DC Comics to do their distribution for them for a fee. Well, more money came out of their pockets because of that, but they said at some point, yeah, that was a mistake because their order didn't go up at all. But now there was another hand in the pie taking a cut. Well, there's a concept in poker called tilt, that when you have a bad beat, when you lose a big pot, sometimes you go just a little bit squiggly trying to make a lot of moves to get it all back quickly. DC went on tilt. They wanted the money they were losing to come back quickly, so they made a newsstand distribution deal. Now, this is when newsstand distribution deals still existed, but they were dying, and rightfully so.
Yes.
Because the thing with newsstand distribution, it is a snake pit of villainy and corruption.
It's returnable, affidavit returnable at that.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Boy, they lost a fortune. I know because of the certain meeting, the exact amount that they lost. I'm not going to repeat it. It was more money than anyone should have lost, any company should have lost at the time. And so they had to cash it in. In order to save his business, the money underwriting guy, Dennis Lasorda, fine fellow, a physical therapist in the sense that he just knew how to put a business together and run it, and rather than keep counting on doctors prescribing physical therapy from his clinic, he just decided to hire a few doctors so that, they could do the full service treatments. He was that kind of guy. One day he picks me up for lunch and he says, "Hey, look at this. Is that worth anything, do you think?" And he'd been in an auction and bought a Rembrandt sketch. That was that guy. So anyway, to save his business, because the business was on the line for all the losses and stuff, they decided to pack it in. Where it gets a bit dicey is Andrew Rev came in. There was 4 partners at the time. There was Phil Lasorda, brother of Dennis Lasorda. There was Bill Cuccinata. There was Jerry Giovinco. Matt Wagner used to be a partner, but actually left the business side so that he could do comics. A few others came and went. But they introduced Andrew Rev as like a 5th partner, that he was going to do a cash injection and just, it was going to be business as usual. What they should have said, because it was the truth, was Andrew Rev is buying the company for pennies on the dollar. I was a little bit wary of all the bad decisions that Comico had made, one after another over the past couple of years. So I was out the door. I did not want to leave friends and colleagues holding the bag. So I said, "Look, I'm leaving, but you guys make me a good enough deal and you can have the Elementals stay, because I'm going to go do other things." Elementals wasn't my only idea, or at least I thought. By the time we were deep into negotiations for the price for Elementals is when I found out that Rev was going to be the only guy there. And I didn't like the guy. He came across as an untrustworthy fellow then. But rather than back out and go to the mattresses the way Matt decided to do, and I should have done what he did, I went ahead with the deal. I regret it. But at the
And
same
took less
time,
than you wanted to take.
I took less than I wanted to take, and he tried to cheat me out of that. Andrew Rev actually has a business philosophy of cheat someone whenever you can. He actually disclosed that philosophy in a convention room, that a convention we were going to do or doing up in Chicago once, and he couldn't understand why everyone in that room that he was trying to get to work for him, they heard him and knew exactly what, like, part of his deal was, if someone's reached the last book of something he's going to do and he's not going to continue working for you, why not cheat him out of that last check, since he got the work in, he's not going to continue anyway. He said these things matter of factly, like this is just business. So yeah,
I've had a couple of phone calls with that guy. He called me.
Yeah.
After, and he watches this show sometimes.
Yeah.
And, he had some interesting business models to propose.
I used to make
a new comic
of giving him an annual call to offer him $1 for the rights back, and I paid for it because you can't get that guy off the phone once you're on it. So
I know.
I suffered from my sense of humor. Yeah, Rev is and was a piece of work. That's why I was able to pronounce with full authority when he announced his latest iteration of a company that they would never get a book out. And so far,
Terrific.
Yeah, horrific.
I've talked to him about it. Well, he's holding back. He's got issues in the can ready to go, though.
So he says,
and
he may, because he can get one issue out of an artist before the artist realizes he ain't going to get paid.
Well, and he's got a new deal too for his new artist for his company, where he owns the rights to sell the original artwork.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw a lot of that. A fellow I shall not name got a hold of some of his standard contracts and sent them to me, and they are bold.
Okay, so you wanted to exit. You think there's any hope of getting those rights. I mean, I don't think that there's much money to be made reprinting Element. I mean, there is some that you could sell probably 5,000 copies to dudes like me all over the world.
Well, the contract to sell him the rights to Elementals, he violated in so many ways. That is there a possibility if I had the funds to go after him and take it to court and test this? Yeah, that could happen. Am I going to do that? No, I'm not going to spend my declining years in court.
Sounds like a
especially
Kickstarter challenge.
Since that court case would drag on because no jury would ever be convinced that, this guy just talks and talks and talks and we don't have any idea what he just said. There would be, oh my God, it would be such a mess. Instead, what I'll probably do is say that I'm pretty sure that his violation of that sales contract voids the sale. Therefore, Rev or whoever he sold out, apparently his brother actually owns it. That's all null and void, and I'm declaring Elementals public domain. Public domain. Anyone who wants it can do it. If you want to be the guy who challenges Rev by just going ahead and coming out with your own Elementals comic, you have my emotional, spiritual support, not my financial support. Go for it. If he challenges you in court, you might be in trouble, although I don't have any confidence. He threatens court cases and lawsuits all the time, never does them. I don't think he has the money to do it as much as he claims to. In any case,
it's a shame.
Elementals, public domain. You heard it from me. If I'm pretty sure it's true. I'm not going to test it myself because I'm on to other things and have been, but go for it.
This is breaking news. I'm no Rich Johnston. I'm getting on the horn to Richie, and we're going big with that one, Bill, because I'm also happen to be involved with a couple of projects that do public domain and semi-public domain, like fan projects. Elementals is one of those ones that is just
well, the public domain, as people might know from Fables, has been very good to me. So I don't, I don't begrudge at all giving a little back if there's any to give.
Oh man!
Once again, cool. I'm saying, look, different lawyers have looked at this contract and come to different conclusions. At least one has said, yeah, even though he broke every part of this, it's still a valid contract, so you're screwed if you kind of do this. So take what I say with a grain of salt.
I'm gonna have to take to Michael Finn, public domain lawyer to the superheroes, and get his take on it. I want to ask.
He's never protected the property. Monolith has come out since then as a DC property by Jimmy Palmiotti, I believe. Vortex is that character that showed up. Fathom, I wanted to at DC. I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison to my Fathom and is it Michael Turner? Michael Turner's Fathom.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Show all the similarities. I mean, she's named Golden. Her name is Silver. It's just all the similarities. Because this was when Fathom and Michael Turner was at the height. And then the ad was going to be, 20 years ago I did this, now Michael Turner's doing this. If you want to see what Michael Turner is going to be up to in 20 years, take a look at what I'm doing now. DC wouldn't go for it. They said that's a little too provocative. But yeah, Morningstar, Ratman, Neil Adams did a Ratman. All of these characters have been done, and Andrew Rev, typical of Andrew Rev, did not do anything to protect his copyrights if he still has them, his trademarks if he still has them. That's the kind of thing that leads me to believe that he is a paper tiger in that realm as well as any other, which is go ahead and do it. Do Elementals. you know, I don't think he will protect them, because I think on some level, even his subterranean troglodytic mind realizes that he's a cheat, and any court would recognize that pretty quickly.
It's a shame, Bill, in a way, though, because in this day and age, like now that superheroes are truly mainstream through film,
Sure.
What a deconstruction of them elementals would be on, say, like a Netflix or like a streaming series or something. Like, it could be an amazing, totally different take on something that people think they know.
Yeah, I had a lot of conversations with Hollywood bigwigs trying to track down the rights to the Elementals, and I tried to dissuade them. Like, you're gonna have to deal with Andrew Rev. You can't deal with Andrew Rev. Don't waste your time. You'll regret it. It's not Michael Bay. It's the other big blow 'em up movie. Is it Bruckheimer?
Yeah, Jerry Bruckheimer.
Jerry Bruckheimer. He calls me out of the blue, says, I want to get the rights to Elementals, and I explain who's got them, and I warn him. He goes, nah, I'll deal with him. I go, okay. He came up to me a few years later at an LA book fair. Very polite guy, waited in line for his chance to say, and he goes,
Wow.
well, I tracked Andrew Rev down, and boy, I should have listened to you, that guy. I go, I tried to warn you.
Okay, Bill, tell me, I gotta know. So
Yeah.
this Pantheon thing came out.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was said to be a wrap up or a tie up of the elementals in some way. Tell me, what's the connection? And
Okay. Near the end of its, or at least my involvement with this run, Elementals was gearing up for this Oblivion War. Remember that?
I loved it. I was on
The
board
Oblivion
for
War is basically the battle that takes place in Pantheon. This is how I would have ended Elementals if I brought it to a conclusion, with the caveat that there is not a character by character mapping.
Okay.
You can't look at this guy and say, oh, that's the monolith character, that's the
Then that makes perfect sense,
right,
to me.
They are separate characters, but the tone of the thing, what we were setting up is that Tommy was going to be seduced by Saker and become the bad guy, and so it's a fight between, one group of elementals and the other. This is what we saw alluded to in issue 12, the dream sequence. And Pantheon is about a world of superheroes in which, well, all the villains are finally defeated. I always wondered why the premise of a superhero book is basically that all superheroes are failures. They fail constantly. They succeed in the short term, but Luthor always comes back. Joker always breaks out of Arkham.
Totally.
Everyone that you thought was dealt with is not, which means you are incompetent and a failure. That is the difference between the story we think we're telling and the story we're actually telling. Why should this be? So I wanted to do a story where the superheroes succeed in what they set out to do. They either killed or locked away all of the villains, and now there's nothing but superheroes. Well, if there's enough of them, inevitably they're going to fight. It's like, we exist to fight. We're gonna, if there's no villains to map into the roles, we're going to do it amongst ourselves, which would have been the inevitable thing in any story once that occurs. The reasons the villains are always going to come back in Marvel and DC is they are valuable company properties.
Sure.
They need to keep those trademarks. They can't kill the Joker and just never have him trouble Batman again, because then they lose the rights to the Joker. The Joker goes in the public domain. Public domain, if you don't use it, you lose it. Elementals has been out of circulation in how long? Public domain, kids. In any case, companies can't do that. When they killed Robin, they did a contest, a phone-in contest. If you want Robin to die, hit this on your phone.
Yeah,
Want
yeah,
Robin to live, hit this on your phone. Vote that way.
called that number.
Yeah,
Killed it.
that was the brainchild of Mike Gold from First Comics, and then he went to DC. And he brought down the New York Telephone Exchange with that stunt. So it was a very successful thing, and by a few votes, apparently it was very close. They decided to kill. People voted to kill Rob. I think they just wanted to see a gladiator, kill him. They wanted to see if they'd do it.
It was my vote that put it over the edge.
Okay, so here's the problem. They did it, and they were patting themselves on the back on what the numbers were up, the interest was up, but DC, part of Time Warner, was a publicly owned company, and the higher ups got poor Paul Levitz, I think, on the phone and said, "You get Robin back right away. You cannot dispose of a valuable corporate asset like that." And the truth is, you can't. There is law that prevents a company from disposing of corporate assets in a way that doesn't, reap any benefit to the stockholders. It's to prevent, malicious guys on the inside, crooks of, I'll let you have this for $1, even though it's a, gold bullion, whatever. To embezzle, it's to prevent that.
Okay. In
IP and intellectual property, those corporate assets are all worth a lot of money. You can't just get rid of them. So they had to bring. That's why.
So this is why we got 5 Robins to this day.
Yeah.
And
Robin came back immediately because they were told, "Do this or pack your bags. You guys are in a shitload of trouble." Corporate assets cannot be disposed of. So all those villains and heroes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are going to be around forever in that corporate world, except for now when a bunch of it is about to go into the public domain. And so DC and Marvel are changing the characters so radically right now to try and escape it's the old, that version may be in the public domain, but this version is our creation that we just.
You think that's what's going on?
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. Yeah. They've got to hold on to those assets any way they can, by hook or by crook. There's only so many times you have the clout to go into Congress and get them to push the trademark and copyright can down the road a bit to let you keep profiting off these things. Eventually, public domain has been rewritten so many times to allow Disney and Marvel, et cetera, to just continue owning.
We did a whole episode. We did a whole episode with Michael Finn and Mark Waid about their public domain crowdfunded book that they put out. And Michael Finn is a lawyer, and he meticulously researched every version, and it's like, only certain aspects of the character are allowed to be used. And if, when Superman comes into the public domain, yes, you could use Superman, but you couldn't use maybe Kryptonite or the Daily Planet yet, because those didn't become active until years after Superman was first created. So it's kind of
right.
Sticky. It's a kind of
all the Edgar Rice Burroughs properties, same way, to where he was so prolific over such a long span of time that even though Tarzan and John Carter and all those are in the public domain, only certain books so far. So if there are ideas and stuff introduced later books and you don't realize it and you do your own unauthorized Tarzan, John Carter, you could wind yourself into some trouble.
Okay, so speaking of prolific
and
many ideas, Pantheon, man, you rolled out a ton of really cool superhero concept, twists on stuff that I had not seen, and I've read a lot of superhero comics.
Yeah, well, it's been a while since I did Elementals. In the meantime, I did Ironwood, I did Coventry for a while.
Great comic.
All that time, I'm still creating ideas for superheroes and just put him in my sketchbooks, put him in my notes, put him in the back of my mind. By the time Pantheon rolled around, I had a buttload of these characters ready to go.
Yeah.
And so here we go.
I mean, Death Boy
Death Boy.
and Chaos Nation are just two such great. Death Boy really reminds me a lot of maybe, you know, what's his face from the cornfield and the Twilight Zone kind of.
Oh yeah,
kind of concept.
yeah. Bill Mummy, I forget the character he's playing, but yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he sends people to the cornfield. The thing is, I'm going to semi-spoil.
Yeah, we won't have to do full spoilers for this one.
Mute it now if you don't want to have Pantheon spoil. It's still available here and there. You should pick it up. Death Boy thought he was disintegrating them too. Everyone thought Death Boy was disintegrating.
Yes.
No one knew. Well, anyway, that's the big reveal.
Yeah. That was a great. I almost forgot about it. Actually,
the thing is, that was created in a Villains and Vigilantes campaign, Death Boy, and I threw this guy at the characters, the gamers. Unfortunately, Jeff D was in the game, and he realized because I'd killed the entire team. And he's like, that's not the way disintegration works in D&V. I smell a rat. There's something else going on. And it was all an excuse to get them all into a different world and have an adventure there. So he scoped it out right away. Hopefully I didn't telegraph it as much in the comic when I brought him into there. Not the first time I grabbed role-playing game characters for the comics, and maybe not the last, who knows?
Sure. Well, and what about Chaos Nation? That was my other really favorite concept.
Chaos Nation was, I think, an original. The idea of collective power, that
so great,
that you get more power the more people you absorb. Kurt Busiek, I think it was Kurt Busiek, did a riff on that after. I think I got there first, but he did one where the main superhero, his powers go up the amount, to the extent that the citizens voluntarily give some of their power to the guy, so that he is all of them. And I thought that was a clever take on it. And they could go to any kiosk and just like, yep, I'm going to lend whatever his Superman character, I forget the character's name, I'm going to lend him a little power today to help fight.
Yeah, great. This was such great stuff. The Robert E. Howard homage to Death Boy, right? Am I right about that? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, this is the origin of Death Boy, where he finds the oh, that's not Death Boy. That is Johnny Babylon, the kid with the God in the box.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, yes.
That is inspired by, I went to the Robert E. Howard house. Mark Finn was kind enough to guide us on a trip there long before they started really having the R.E. Howard days and a big festival that now exists. But we went there on either the anniversary of REH's death or his birthday, I forget which. But anyway, we went there, and the ladies, the historical society that owns the house and will open it up for anyone that wants to tour it, they had original manuscripts that he wrote. I mean, the actual typed pages that he typed, just laying out on the table. And I picked up the manuscript to what is it? Is it called Drums Along the Black River, or one of the great Conan stories? And I had the manuscript that he wrote in my hands, and no one was looking, and I could have stuffed it into my pants, and the temptation was vast. I found out that I can't claim to be a good person, but at least I know that there are some limits, because I did not steal the manuscript.
Good for you. What are you going to do with it, really, though?
Well, other than own it, because, look, I got to write a novel on the actual desk, not a copy of it, the actual desk that Kipling wrote Jungle Book on. So, there's something, and there's something that's transferred to that. I don't believe in magic and supernatural stuff, but there's something going on there. In any case, it was on that trip that me to a certain extent, but mostly Mark Finn said, look, they should not be handling these manuscripts directly, or at least get the cotton gloves, that people were. And so he taught these wonderful little old ladies in the Historical Society the basics of how to preserve this stuff for a long time to come. And so now you can't get in and handle that stuff, and you can't sit at the same typewriter that he wrote at, but back then you could. I forget why I went off on that digression. Oh, anyway, yeah.
Glad you did.
So I use that in Pantheon.
Well, I'm glad you're talking about writing, because at what point did you make the transition from writer penciler to predominantly writer? I mean, I know you've still penciled over the years, and I remember you did Shadow Pact series 10 years ago.
Well, I've slowed down, which is part of it. When I broke into comics, there were very few rules that were known. Nowadays, you can find out anything. Back then, the internet, there were not books or schools on comics. Well, there actually was. Joe Kubert had started a school. I just wasn't aware of it. But I didn't know any rules about doing comics. You had to figure out for yourself. So I presumed, just because of so many examples, that when you broke in, you either drew or you wrote. You didn't do both. I wanted to draw a little more than I wanted to write, so I picked that one. Breaking in is easier. I mean, it's a lot of work. Drawing is a lot of work, but it's easier because here's a secret. Editors, every editor that ever existed, I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but they are the exceptions. They hate to read. They won't read. You throw a manuscript down in front of them. That's why publishers hire slush readers, because the editors, the people that manage don't want to read that crap. You cannot break in easily as a writer unless you've written something that's been published. As an artist, if you do 6 good sample pages, in a minute, any editor can look at them and know whether or not you got it or you don't. They may not understand the structure of drawing or whatever like that, but they can see, yep, this guy can draw, this guy can't. That makes drawing as breaking in easier, in the sense of easier to get the job, harder to do the job. I added writing back into my repertoire because drawing is hard. It's so much hard work that you have to do for an entire day. You have to finish a page, and then you have to get up the next day and do it all again, as if starting from square one. Every artist starts his career from square one every day. God, that takes a force of will that boggles me. If you're going to do that effort, why expend that effort in service of bad scripts? And I was getting some really bad scripts.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So finally, I decided, look, if this is the state of the art, I can do at least this bad on my own, and then I get to make my own decisions. So I started back writing. Writing can be done quicker. I think there's still the requirements of telling a good story and all that, but it can be done quicker than, I can write 4 books in the time it takes to draw 1. So it was just that. It was kind of the easier pathway. I miss drawing. I draw a lot. People don't see a lot of it.
Mostly commissions these days?
Commissions. There's always a project I'm working on. Some of these take a long time to come out, but mostly writing.
I had Big B versus Batman here, and one of my kids grabbed it and ran off with it. So I wanted to show that. I don't have that. And all my fables got stolen years ago when my comic book collection got stolen.
Really?
Yeah, my brother stole them. He's dead now, so what are you gonna do? Joke's on him.
I'm sorry that that's the case, but I
don't have any fables to show.
There are new
I wish I did.
Available right now.
Yeah, I wish I did. So let's talk about the new stuff. Let's talk about fables in general. Let's move into that, and then we can talk about the new fables material. So Fables. How so you were which were you writing for first? Were you working on mainstream DC books and made the move to Vertigo, or did you go from Proposition Player and Vertigo books and then start writing Robin after that? How did that work?
I was offered Robin as well as other books on the strength of Fables. Fables did well for DC,
Right.
and
Okay, that's how I remember.
for a while, I was getting a lot of offers, and I took a lot of them. I said no to some. I wish I'd been more adamant about getting prose books done at the height of Fables, because those offers have dried up from publishers. The memory in any kind of creative industry is short.
Mhm.
So that's another. Make hay while the sun shines, the old adage goes, and you should listen to that. In any case, Fables took off. Fables happened almost accidentally again. I was doing some writing here and there for Vertigo with Shelley Bond, who I first met at Comico. She came in just before Comico died. It was her first job, so she had a fond memory of it. She kept trying to get me to work for her, and I kept resisting it because Vertigo was, that's pouty lipped teenagers with shrapnel in their face doing whatever they do, and it wasn't my cup of tea.
Not a fan of Sandman?
I like some of them. What I like to read and what I can write and want to write are often two different things. I could never write a Sandman. I tried. I wrote in the Sandman universe, but I kept making it, goofy and funny. I did the, Merv Pumpkinhead, Agent of Dreams.
Yeah. Yes.
I did the Thessaly stuff that that I thought was clever, but apparently there was too much humor, and she should be a morose twee witch girl. So it didn't do so well.
She was an inherently kind of humorous character.
Yeah. I don't need humorless people in my lives, even fictional. So I was doing some because, she was giving me work, and that was keeping the wolf from the door. But I was working up this idea for Fables that I'd been circling for a long time. I mean, if you see from the early Elementals, I keep putting fairy tale and mythological stuff into my books, even back then. Apparently, and it was just a matter of time that I had time living in Vermont at the time to sit and think, well, what is it I want to do? Well, I want to do fairy tales or mythology or something. And so I started working on the proposal for it. I thought I would shop it around to anyone but Vertigo, because it was not Vertigo's cup of tea. There was going to be absurd humor. There was going to be action adventure. There was going to be the kind of politics of social interaction that were not really the Vertigo thing. So one day I'm talking to Shelley. She's trying to get me interested in a couple of sassy female detectives. And I'm like, I'll try, but pitching to Vertigo, for every 10 things that I pitch, maybe one will get picked up. It will get some critical attention and sales in the dozens. It was just not working out. So I told her at one point, it was a Friday, I said, look, I got to go. I got to cut this short. Now, the one thing you don't ever want to say to Shelley Bond is to cut a phone call short. So she gets suspicious. She goes, why do you have to go? What is it you're doing? The only work you're doing for me. So, and I said, well, I've got this pitch I'm trying to get ready to go out Monday for a new series, but don't worry, it's nothing Vertigo would like. And she forced me to tell her the whole thing. I told her the whole Fables pitch, and she goes, yeah, okay. You're not sending that out Monday you're sending it to me. We're going to take it. We're going to do it. Have it on my desk Monday. She was very, very bold that day. So they took it. I was surprised. I was surprised as hell that they accepted it. One of the reasons they accepted it is Jeanette Kahn, who was on her way out the door then, but was still in charge at the moment, got a look at it. No one knew she was going from comics to movies then. She said, I can make a movie out of this. And so she said, yep, get this. It's a good thing they took it when they did, because just about 3 or 4, maybe 5 days after I sent the proposal in, and it got immediately accepted, which was remarkable. I've seen DC take 8 years to decide to accept a book. Not one of mine, thank God. They accepted it. A few days later, I saw the first ad for the first Shrek movie. And I thought, there's every idea I had right there. So I call them up and I say, well, you've seen the Shrek ad. They beat us to it. I'm going to go ahead and withdraw my proposal, because we don't want to be, accused of just following in their footsteps. And they said, you're stupid. Which is actually an accusation that's been thrown my way often under many circumstances. They said, we're still going to do the book. It's not going to be the same as that movie. We're still doing it. And I'm glad that they were. If I had waited and, even sent it out, but if anyone had waited to decide that, and I'd seen the Shrek thing, I would have withdrawn the thing. It never would have been published. It was lucky that DC got their greedy hands on it when they did.
I'm trying too hard not to laugh, Bill, but like I go, like how many then after Fables came out and was a big hit, like how many, and with the idea from the beginning that it could be adapted to TV or film, and then all those fairy tale knockoff things started coming out. I can't even remember them. But
in the time of steam engines, people will build steam engines.
Is that the problem with using public domain material, though? Is that like anybody else can use them too, right? And,
yeah. I got a lot of heat for not being more upset about Once Upon a Time. And although I think some fables may have inspired them in some ways, those characters are public domain. The essence of public domain is everybody owns them. I would be the worst sort of hypocrite to say, oh, you can't use that character now because fables. No, it's, plus that stuff didn't really come out until almost 10 years after Fables was going and going strong.
Yeah, right.
We had a 10-year head start.
Totally.
DC bought the film rights to Fables right away, which is why I can't shop them. They can. This is good. I got a nice house out of it. But DC had plenty of opportunity to get something made, and they bungled it. Oh, they made some horrible, horrible decisions. Every once in a while,
surprising, man. That's been all I've been seeing coming out of DC executive.
Oh yeah,
in the past year or so.
There's a few screenplays of different people's takes. This is for a pilot for a series or a movie. They all, like, some of these, my response was, yeah, this is a pretty good story. Not Fables, though. I don't know who these characters are. DC had plenty of chances. If they wanted to be first on the fairy tale in modern urban environment bandwagon, they had the opportunity and they blew it. So, but you got to understand another thing. There is not a lot of motivation for a big company to actually get their properties made. There's almost more profit to be made to not make things than to make them. And here's why. When let's say you own the movie rights to Fables, and they have their accountants estimate what's that worth as a valuable thing to the DC mega Time Warner, now AT&T family. What's it worth? Well, we say, let's say it's worth $5 million. That's $5 million in assets that they throw in front of their stockholders once a year, that they have to, and say, and here's how many assets we have, including this property that's worth $5 million. Now, why is that worth $5 million? It's because someone pulled that number out of a hat. Now let's get it made. well, there's a lot of costs. What does it get? You know, what's it worth? What if it doesn't make that $5 million? Then you have to go to your stockholders and explain how you lost. Let's say it made $1 million. What you have to tell them is, well, we lost $4 million because it was imaginary money,
Right.
but that's it. That was one of the problems plaguing. It took a long time for iZombie to get made because it was too valuable as an asset on the books, and maybe the actual.
So in other words, having it at an imaginary valuation, it's a lot like apartments that go unrented.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And like they can't lower the rent because that would lower the value of the property, and they can borrow against the value of the property.
Right.
And it never occurred to me before. Somebody told me this recently. You borrow against it. When you borrow money, that's tax-free. As opposed to selling it, you got to pay taxes on that money that
Yes.
you paid me for something. But if
Yes.
I borrow against an imaginary asset, it's like free money.
Welcome to modern finance. It is
Holy moly.
boggling, and yet that's how it works. DC has a wonderfully valuable property with Fables, probably as long as they never get it made, or never let it get made. We had Heyday. What's his first? The producer of the Harry Potter. I'm spacing his first name.
Not Chris Columbus.
No.
Director.
David Heyman. I want to say Heyday. I knew a Heyday back in the day. Anyway, one of the 900-pound gorillas of Hollywood, a few left. The producers rarely get to be that powered anymore, but he just did the Harry Potter movies. He wanted to do Fables next, and my agent and I tried to put packages together. We met, we feasted each other. It's just, but Time Warner just wouldn't do it. And it's like, if this guy can't get it made, who can? Don't count on it being made until there's so little value in the imaginary version of the movie that someone will take a risk with the actual version of a movie. That's why, a good, a set of movies like The Lord of the Rings didn't get made until 60 years after the fact. There was no movie value by the time they did it, almost, what they would have to pay. Dune, whatever, pick your thing. Or it's a company asset where, remember things like the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Every smart move before that was people telling them, you cannot do this. This is an impossible thing to do. You are going to lose your fucking shirt. And they did it. Imagine, everyone likes to poo-poo these people. It's like, oh, these are cookie-cutting movies.
Yeah.
The will, the force of will to get those things done when every expert in the world knew it couldn't be done. And then others came along after the fact and proved that it can't be done. The Universal Monster Cinematic Universe, the Dark Universe. Oh, bungled. Anyway, so
I think they did it. It was, to me, what Kevin Feige's genius was sort of a patience in playing the long game of that strategy.
Patience in playing the long game and imposing his will. There's so many complaints about Joss Whedon, the second Avengers movie. Is like, there's so many things they made me do with this movie. And it's like, yeah, look, this guy's driving a huge fucking ship, and you are one of the passengers. You think it's your ship, but someone once said in a different context, I think they were talking about a glossy magazine, like a fashion magazine, but I think it applies to anything. So the story is not strong enough. Film, a book, a comic, whatever, is not strong enough to survive the mistakes of more than one person. Too many people second guessing everything. It's doomed. Everyone very rightfully all my career, told, oh, this was a mistake and that's a mistake, and oh my God. And you're right, I bungled it right and left, except they were my mistakes, and you know, the books survived as a result of the fact that someone was firmly in charge, I believe.
Well, I think that's also a great reason why so many amazing creative visions have come out in comics form. Just 'cause that smaller team size, it's still a team, so you get the creative dynamics and the interplay between really talented team, but you don't have this humongous bloated bureaucracy.
Right, it takes 300 people to get a movie made, even a bad one.
Yeah, 300. Like, if you count
Half a dozen people can do a comic. If you
nowadays, it's craft
well,
services is 300 people. You know, it's amazing.
Yeah. The fewer people involved in creating a story, the better, which is why substantially, or two, in addition to comics, I do a lot of prose work now, because one guy gets to decide where that ship is going, and that's it. And maybe editors will try and change it later on, but if you stick to your guns, like, you know, the novel you write is your story, and that is pretty compelling.
Okay, I want to shift a couple questions here. One thing about Fables, one more thing. I had read that you wrote it as sort of a metaphor for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Is that true? And what's your take on? Because it is
real.
Yeah.
Let's get that out. I don't practice politics with my comics. I use the Israel situation, surrounded by enemies, to describe tiny fable town against the vastness of the empire. I think it's a very good metaphor. The people that are upset about it have never been able to, you know, we're upset because that implies that Israel's a good place. Well, boo-hoo on you.
Right.
It still works because Israel is a tiny country surrounded on all sides by a vast number of enemies.
Sure.
As anything, it was a metaphor for, I mean, it was set in New York because of Ellis Island. People come to the new world for a new start. That's Fables. Fables is they left the old world.
Yeah.
They cast their fortunes to the wind off a rumor that things are good in this place, and they come to the new world and they've got a new start. That's it. How dare I?
Great. Well, you know, for the record, I'm Palestinian, right? But I also, you know, I find people get so outraged at even the hint of a political idea in comics, and there have been some at DC that said that they were sort of outed and castigated by the DC editorial and higher ups because of their political leanings. Have you ever felt anything like that, or feel like that's a real thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, people are vicious. If I can steal a joke about academics, the reason the fights in comicdom are so vicious is because the stakes are so low. You're never going to see the Blacklist, because the one thing we learned about Blacklists from way back when is never write it down, you stupid fuck. But I've encountered the Blacklist. I've encountered the Blacklist a few times because I was on it. Deservedly so, in the sense that I was a screw up, I wasn't getting work done, and from time to time, the word comes down, it's like, don't hire this guy anymore. He will waste our money and get us in trouble.
That's reasonable reason to be. I wouldn't call that a blacklist per se, as just like got a bad reputation in the industry for your work.
Many times, one of the things with Fables is I use that as a mechanism for getting to work with all the artists I've always wanted to work with. I got to finally work with Neil Adams. I mean, who knew? Jack Kirby died before he could, but you know, Bernie Wrightson, I got to work with. That was a mystery. Richard Corbin. Anyway, I asked for Barry Windsor Smith. Barry Windsor Smith is beloved to me, and I was just told to no on certain terms. It's like Shelley would say, "I'll ask, but they will not let Barry Windsor Smith work for this company again." I don't know why.
Barry's on the
with,
blacklist? I thought you were going to say he wouldn't want to work with you or something like that.
Oh, maybe, but no, we never got to ask him. Dave Sim was just always like, no, you can't get him here. He's a troublemaker, etc. The blacklist exists. It's constantly being updated, whatever. The blacklist is basically, I mean, almost every company has one. It's like, these are the people we like, these are the people we don't like. No one can look at the fights and the sniping and the what have you that's going on, mostly because now things like YouTube and all that exist to give a platform for all this, and not understand. It's like, I won't work with this person. Hell, if I was inclined to, in 30 minutes, I could get several people, old tweets or what have you, just saying, nope, won't work with that person because I don't like his Nazi attitude about this and Nazi attitude about that. I've met Nazis. I mean, actual ones. Those that were in the war. When I was stationed in Germany, a lot of them were working for the U.S. forces then because, I don't know, we believe in redemption, and they spent some time in U.S. prisoner of war camp. And then back in the time of my time in Germany, the U.S. Army was the largest single hirer of German people. I met a few. We live in a time now where everyone is apparently fighting these imaginary Nazis, and that is it's either just outright vicious lying for advancing of your agenda, or some kind of mass hallucination, because I got to tell you something. If you ever met a real Nazi, you'd know
it. I mean, I think you're onto something when you say mass hallucination, because I think there is a little bit of that going on, in the sense that it's not a huge majority of people on that ultra left-wing social justice warrior. You are a Nazi, you're unacceptable, you're a non-person. That's a small minority, but their voice gets amplified and retweeted. And in this universe where people write news stories about like things that just random people tweeted, it's like, it would be like a newspaper story on what somebody wrote on a bathroom wall. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me sometimes. But then this one little thing that some kook wrote somewhere gets turned into like, this is the zeitgeist of the nation right now. Because
yeah. And a lot of it is that so many people that repeat it are not serious people. I entered a friendship with a young lady I adored, not in a romantic way. Oh dear God, never that. But she was a writer and a TSR person that came along after my time. And we just got along well together. Just adored her. Had a great husband. Her husband was great. But she was super liberal and I'm conservative. And one day, just flippantly, she said, "Well, you only think that because you're basically a Nazi." She did not understand what she was actually saying. To this day, I wonder if she wonders why I've never spoken to her again since then, because that's the main part. It's like a lot of this, Nazis bad, whatever, is just a lack of seriousness. You don't really believe that there are, because I'm to the right of you politically, that we've got death camps that you don't happen to know about, where we're putting people to death by the million. I mean, that's just relentlessly stupid. But it's an easy, I think, because you can call someone something out of not understanding it. Like these people, cushy lives, never had to, you know, step up to defend their country in the way that matters. You say flippant things. Look, when I was a kid in Germany, we used to write swastikas on the. Well, I was 5 years old. I didn't know why. I didn't know what it meant. But when people saw it, they freaked out in a way that's like, oh, as a little kid, I was able to make a real adult do this. This is like the first wielding of power
Yes.
I ever had. And of course, if you're about to be caught, it's easy to make a swastika into a window. I'm just drawing windows. You know? Lots of kids in our neighborhood then did lots of windows. That was a result of I can provoke a reaction, and I had no idea. I didn't know what this symbol meant. Had no idea the prices that were paid for it and to overcome it. I think that's people now. It's like they use these things that provoke a reaction and gather a little bit of the spell, the fabrication of power to themselves in a world that is like, well, it's kind of a tough world, and I'm overwhelmed by it, and I suspect I'm not one of the big important people in it, and that's, I think, what's really a killer. But I can do this and provoke a reaction.
Yeah.
It's an unserious thing today, and it'll pass.
I think we're on this wave right now where
I hope so.
there's almost the other side of it where there's money to be made in being canceled, right? And in being censored and in being told this and being told you're a Nazi or whatever. There's people are garnering tons and tons of support for online, not through mainstream channels, and using that to like keep the fire burning, right? To keep the anger going and the story going in a way because it leads to monetary gain for them.
For almost an entire generation, there is wealth in both actual wealth and in you know, position and societal power in victimhood.
Yeah.
Like the bigger kind of victim you are, if you can subscribe to more categories of victimhood, the reason you can reap benefits and fund me's and this and that from that is that we are basically, it only works if we're basically a compassionate people. Because if for most of human history, we were brutal people whom, if you have the power to enforce your will on the next guy, you did. And that's the only way power accumulates. Nowadays, we give it away as a, oh, you've tugged my heartstrings, so yeah, of course you can do this, or you know, you should get some money because you had a tough go here. Nowadays, canceled has, and these things are, this progression is happening quicker, I think, with each iteration. Cancel is one of those things to where there really are, and within just the last few years, oh, I heard that you believe differently from me, I'm taking your livelihood away. I remember the first time I noticed it is a bunch of people, I think in Redwood City, California, but don't hold me to that. There was this beloved guy that owned a movie theater, and he was everyone. He was the doorman, the projectionist, et cetera, et cetera. And they heard that he voted for, let's say Reagan, I forget who. And they all moved to have him ousted. They went to the owners, whatever, the investors, threw him out on his ass, and he was suddenly homeless and without position because they found out that he voted for the wrong person. That's a real tragedy. Nowadays, yeah, if you can, I mean, there's a certain number of people who will recognize, ooh, that's a source of, I can be the best victim here and get compassion and get GoFundMe's and
It's amazing, and it's victimhood on top of victimhood.
Yes.
It's spiraling and snowballing into this, and there's so much cash being just thrown around in this environment, funding lawsuits against people, and it's really kind of gross.
People will game every system. There's no system that people won't game. I just read today that it's estimated that 42% of all of the COVID, support money that went out was basically grabbed by crooks, because
That doesn't surprise me at all.
anything that comes up as a way will always be gamed by the people that know how to work the system.
Oh yeah.
Part of me is like, I like a good caper flick, and this is human nature. No matter what you come up with, someone's going to find some way to turn a illegal and immoral profit from it. That is human nature. What do you do about it? In my world, you figure out who your friends are, figure out who you're responsible to. You look after your own. You live and let live as much as you can. And if the world is going to go insane, don't participate. I have friends, at least one, who thinks she's fighting these imaginary Nazis every day. And for friendship maintenance, because her husband is someone I want to keep contact with, I avoid doing so how many Nazis did you meet today? What did they look like? What did you do to fight them? It's because this is fantasy, and it's dull fantasy. I mean, if you're going to live in a fantasy world, go. Oh,
well, it does two things. It does two things too. One, it diminishes what it is, what a Nazi really is, and what that means. But the other thing is it can empower the very people that you're trying to depower, right? You can call attention to something, Streisand effect style, by telling people not to, you have to not look at these people, and suddenly that lets them ignite a fire under their fan base. And it's just been a really interesting few years in that regard.
Oh yeah. May you live in interesting times, the curse and the blessing. It's always the case. And it's going to get worse for a while. I won't have to do, I don't know how old you are. I can make a couple of guesses based on the gray in your beard. But I won't be around to have the lights go out. But I think the generation after me will be here when it does. And when it does, the rules are going to change so quick.
Yeah.
I don't envy those that are going to have to adjust to the new way of things quickly.
It might be sooner than you think, though,
Well, you got to understand, these pockets of civilization, even now at the height of Western civilization, they don't encompass the entire world.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
There are still people living the brutal existence. That's always the default setting for humanity. Is existence is brutal, short, and it's better than the alternative, but barely.
That's true, Bill.
We're
at 2 hours here right now.
Are we?
I don't know.
Well, yeah, you're gonna have to split this thing up into a couple of.
I'll chunk it up. This is why I usually do these things live, because when I'm done with the show, I walk away and I never watch the thing again. I'm gonna have to go back through mining for.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do some work.
Wisdom. No, it's great, Bill. I love it. I'm so into it. Do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, just a couple things.
I'll stop when you get uninteresting. So far, you ain't got there yet.
I'm interested, dude. I'm interested, but I got a family, I got a wife and kids I got to get back to pretty soon here. I guess where I want to go with this is what what's next for Bill Willingham? What is the next after the Fables? You've got some new Fables material on the table right now.
Yeah, I should probably promote some stuff.
Yeah, promote that.
All right, next, even though you can't show it,
I'll show
Batman Bigby. Batman Bigby happened because I like writing detective stories, and that's so I made Bigby a detective. Well, you can't have the idea to have a detective in comics and not, want to do a team up with another detective in comics, especially the detective in comics. So every once in a while, I would offer this idea. Early on in Fables, they'd say, "What else do you want to do? What kind of spin-offs?" I go, "I want to do Batman meets Bigby," and they would laugh at the Vertigo offices because they don't have a lot of respect for the DC. They'd think I was making a joke every time. I wasn't, but you fight the battles you can win. It was clear to them that was only a joke. It wasn't until they were gone at some convention when Mark Doyle, who is a fine fellow, got shit canned from DC, came up to me and said, "Let's do something for Fables anniversary." And I said, "Well, if you're going to want to do more Fables, I'm going to get something out of it too." So 1 is Batman versus Bigby. 2, I want to do a Christmas story, etc. I got my 3-book deal, like the old Hollywood 3-picture deal. And he said, "We'll run that by the people." But I said, that's the condition. You want more Fables, you got to take this. I learned that from Edgar Rice Burroughs. So the reason the number of Tarzan books roughly matches the number of everything else he did is he early on made a deal. All they wanted, the publishers, was another Tarzan. He said, for every Tarzan, you got to buy one more book of stuff. Yeah, perfect. Wonderful guy. Anyway, so I made that deal. Dan DiDio, another guy recently shit canned from DC, fine fellow.
I interviewed him on this very show recently.
Oh, good. He comes by and says, "I hear you're talking about new Fables." I said, "Yep, it's got some conditions. It's the 3-picture deal. Here's the other stuff I want to do." I think at that time I didn't know what the third one was, but there was going to be a third book. But it was Batman Bigby, a new Fables arc that was not Batman, and a third thing. And Dan
to be named.
Yeah. DiDio said, "That's a great idea. Let's do it." And we shook hands on it. Now, the thing with Dan DiDio that people poo-poo him, some don't, but handshake deal is as good as gold with him. I knew we had a deal. It took a while to work out all the details contract-wise, but we had the deal. So that's starting now. Batman and Bigby is 6 issues. The second issue just came out, so there's 4 more of those. At the point that's done, the new Fables starts. That's 12 issues monthly. Mark Buckingham is doing the work of his career there. I say that every issue, but he always gets better. God damn him.
Amazing.
And that is going to be a 12-issue thing that picks up right where Fables 150 left off.
Is James Jean involved at all?
Pardon me?
Is James Jean involved?
No. James Jean wanted to go do fine art ever since I met him. He did this as a breaking in gig. Got famous for it, rightly so. He wanted to quit, maybe 20, maybe 30 issues in, and we got 80 covers from him. He was that generous. At the time when DC was paying him the biggest amount they could afford to pay for a cover, which was a pittance compared to what he was getting. He was working for Scientific American and Prada and all that at the same time and make.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So the Fables covers was a work of love for him for so long, and finally he had to leave. And I do not begrudge him anything. And so many editors wanted, "Can't you call him, or I'll call him for you? Like, can we ask him back?" And don't do it. The guy's doing what he loves now. And if you follow him, some of the stuff he does is amazing. Why?
Everything he does is amazing, including those covers. What it was the cherry on the sundae of
It was amazing stuff. More
Fables for sure.
just I'm certain that some of the early success, probably most of the early success of the Fables books came because of him. One of the horror stories I look back, there's infinite universes, and every decision, every molecule that could go left or right does both, and a new universe splits off. There's a version, because when we got to the end of the first story arc, Karen Berger asked me, like, okay, who's the cover artist for the new story arc going to be? I go, well, James Jean. I go, oh no. She didn't get him. She didn't get him at first. I think she came around, but
You said Karen Berger said no.
yeah. So that's why in the midst of that,
So much for those golden editorial instincts, huh?
either issue 5 or issue 6 or issue 7, it's got that one cover from I forget who. I'm not trying to diss him. I'm an old guy. I'm spacing his name. That's because they wanted a new cover artist, and I said no, it's James Jean, and Shelley said, okay, if you insist, we can eat the cost of this cover for the Jack solo story, and have James Jean do it if you insist on it. And I say, insist on it. And she goes, oh no, we can't do it. I was bluffing. So that's why this China. But we got him back for the next big story, and then he stayed for 80 issues. So not everyone got it, but Vertigo was the house of, we want to do pouty lip teenagers with face shrapnel, tattoos, and lots of twee. And I don't think James did any of that.
And so I'm sorry I interrupted you though. What was is the third project, or have you?
Oh, and the third project is a Christmas story, just a 48 page. I have a new character that saves Christmas, but helps the Justice League save Christmas. We haven't even talked about.
It's not Fables related at all. It's
no. It's a cool standalone, done in one thing.
You got an artist attached?
No, not yet. That's why that's the last in the whole thing, and there's such disruption in DC offices right now that when Fables is coming to a close, I'll start asking about the other thing.
Well, you never really worked at Marvel, right?
This and that, once in a while. I did a Thor 4-part thing, Warriors 3. I did a couple of Nightcrawler one-shots that I rather like.
Okay.
But not much.
I would say DC has most of the big guns right now. A lot of really big guns as far as art talent to draw from.
Right now, both houses have changed their characters so much that, look, the characters I grew up reading, Marvel and DC, don't exist anymore substantially. I mean, some of them still bear the same name, but they don't exist. There are vast quantities of continuity that have come and gone, and I will never be able to catch up. That's why the deal with the Batman Bigby is be entirely out of continuity. So as a result, we see a slightly different world version of Batman. Only slightly different, and because I love the character, why change what he is and what his motivation? I think it's the truest Batman being done right now, but that's me, pride of authorship.
Great.
But it is different. It's like, because I could not take the continuity of any character, no matter whom. I can barely remember the continuity of Fables. I actually have a team of readers that help me remember, because it's so complex with so many characters. It's hard to keep it all.
Speaking of continuity and changes to your character, and maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but didn't you write in your Substack about a connection to the new Superman's son, young Superman, and his gay relationship was a character from Robin, or am I mixing that up?
No, you're mixing it up. Robin came out as bi or gay. It's
One
gay.
of the Tim Drake.
Right.
Okay.
During my run on Robin, which was the Tim Drake character, I created a character named Bernard Dowd, who he was the asshole, kind of dick friend, the Eddie Haskell, that one of which is assigned to every high school, who gets involved with Dick Grace.
He's the Flash Thompson of this.
Right, he is, and kind of a asshole friend, loosely based on a fellow I knew in high school that is just a pain in the ass, but one of the finest fellows one will ever meet. So Bernard Dowd, who, rose fully formed from my forehead, was whatever he wasn't gay, and that's who they picked. So I pointed out the irony is, like, everyone's talking about Tim Drake, but my poor little Bernard Dowd character, apparently he got retconned too, and no one noticed. It was just a little tweak at the industry and its ways.
So do you think these changes, these sexuality changes, whatever, are part of what you were alluding to before about making changes to characters to just keep the copyright?
I think that's part of it, is that at some point they're on the threshold of all of these things can be challenged for ownership, and you have to make them different so that even if you lose the original version, you still have this, and this is a new character, and we can keep the copyright forever. Part of it, I think, is that creators want to leave their mark on something. Claremont and Byrne did the Dark Phoenix saga and set the comics industry on its ass with it, like, oh my God, look what they did. Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams did that to Batman, and then they did it again to Green Lantern and Green Arrow. And the entire industry said, oh my God, look what they did. And then Frank Miller did it with The Dark Knight, and then Alan Moore did it with Watchmen. Every once in a while, Simonson did it with Thor, and that stuff is beloved to me. There is a creative impulse to leave your mark, and you want the entire industry, your peers, to say, oh my God, look what you did. You changed the entire game. So I think that's part of it. It used to be,
I see where you're going.
After Dark Phoenix, it was, let's find every excuse possible to make our heroic character evil for a while. Usually it's mental possession by space alien, whatever. The other trend was, dark, grim, and gritty. Well, you got this far with Dark Knight Returns, so I'm going to even take it this far, and then I'm going to take it this far. Everyone has to push the envelope, to borrow that oft-used pilot's term. Now this is the new that, I think. It's just like, okay, the new trend now is, look how much press we got when, Rawhide Kid was gay, and killing. Superman dies, so everyone dies.
Yes.
And it's the diminishing returns. Superman dies, and the entire world sat up and took notice. The next guy dies, and it's like, yeah, okay, we've seen that. So this will run its course too. Right now,
I mean, do you think there's a case, though, to be made for the fact that, a lot of types of people were underrepresented for so long, in part because of, underrepresentation maybe of the types of people involved in making the comics, that, that it's a natural for the next generation that's reinventing it to reinvent a more multicultural stable of characters? Or do you feel like it's...
I don't think so. I think there's always been multicultural. You got to understand that Black Panther was created by two New York Jews. Old cigar smoking guys, every cliche. You do not need someone who fits the category of whatever. Say, okay, we got a team book. All right, the women, we got to have women come in to write those, and then we got to bring in the guy to write this. Like, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
It goes back to you want to tell a good story, make sure there's one guy at the helm. I don't think that holds up. I think the diversity was greater when there wasn't someone looking over your shoulder saying, oh no, we can't have a guy like you write a character like this. There was a lot of stupid ideas permeating comics. I was told in my career lifetime, now granted, that's 40 years, so I guess that's a while. When I was pitching an idea for a female-led comic at DC, I was told that you can't have a female headlining a book. It won't sell. This was when I had female-led Elementals.
That's what I was just about to say, Bill.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
strong female characters. You were the guy.
Right. Apparently the proof saying, but here's proof that it can sell, doesn't work. But then eventually now you look at any team book and it's like, 6 women and 2 token guys. So, things change. The pendulum swings and swings back. I don't think you need to be a certain type of person, a category, in order to tell a certain type of story. What you need to do is be a deft storyteller.
That's the type of person you need to be, right? And that's the type of person that can put themselves in many different shoes or circumstances and reflect that in their writing.
Right. And I also don't agree with the write what you know. I think that's too restricting an adage. It's write what you can find out. Write what you can find out with some authority and understanding. I think this is a trend. I think this is just the trend of the moment. And I've seen so many of them come and go. Like I said, all superheroes have to go insane for a while. Now they all have to be gay because people are still it's not going to change. People are still getting on TV because of what's his name?
That's
Superman gay is getting TV coverage because these TV people don't know a goddamn thing about comics. So it's just like, wow, Superman's gay now. That's news. So they're going to get on TV and they're going to talk and opine. And I had my moment on TV. But these people are never going to have like, well, let's have this guy challenged by another guy in comics that disagrees.
right.
Because they don't care about that nonsense. They just want to have, a puff piece on the headline that Superman's gay now. When that goes away, when they get tired of that, and when they killed Superman, it was the same thing. These guys got on TV.
Well, I mean, it has as much to do with it being a slow news day when they drop these stories almost as anything else. Captain America's death 10 years ago hit pretty hard.
Yeah,
not as hard as Superman, but it hit pretty hard. And so
after a while, people get tired.
But maybe when it is commonplace enough, it won't be newsworthy, and maybe that sort of is the kind of the end.
That's the whole point. Is eventually the news people get tired of that. You'll have to come up with something else. I would love to start a betting pool on what the next outrageous thing will be. Just because if you do it, then you get a little bit of attention now. As comic artists, we're performers, but we're performers removed from the performance. We don't get up on stage and do our play and get the adoration of the crowds the way a singer does, an actor, a stand-up comedian. But we're in the same business. We're in the business of jumping up on that metaphorical stage and saying, look, I'm egotistical enough to think that I can hold your attention for as long as I want to. And not only will you give me the time and the attention I want, but you're going to pay me a little for it too. It's of that value. Now that's a pretty big swaggering thing to do, even if you're going to do it as a writer and you don't actually jump up on the stage. You're producing it in obscurity, and then eventually it gets out there. I'll bet a lot of us get tired of the obscurity. We sit in a room and we do our stuff, and we don't have the interactions, and we don't have the connectivity and all that. And someone, if I do this, someone is going to let me be on their news show to talk about it to, like, people who could care less about that. That's a pretty big siren song. The motivation is to do that. And I think the motivation will never change. The object of that, the thing that's going to get you on that TV show or whatever passes for that when civilization falls, that will change. Like it's make him gay right now. It was kill him. It was make him insane but
I think it should be the default. I think it should be the default that, like, if you dress like most superheroes dress, people are going to assume you probably are gay. Like Superman is not a very big surprise to anybody in mincing around in that outfit.
Well, the idea was to stand out. The best explanation for the kind of the gaudy circus, it was circus people dressed back when they first invented it. The pulp hero ideal was to not be noticed, to blend into the shadows, whatever like that. And Batman is the result of that. But the superhero idea was to stand out, to be a symbol, to be something like, if I'm on the battlefield, you're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Odell, who created Green Lantern, and I will never forgive anyone who does Green Lantern that got away from his ideal. He was an artist looking for work. A friend said, look, this group DC, I think it was National Periodicals at the time, they're hiring. You got to make a superhero. Batman and Superman were like, it then at the time. So we went up to the offices and they said, yep, come up with a character and we'll do a deal. And so he said, well, I got to go home and think of a character. And he didn't. Superheroes hadn't really been invented yet. So what the hell do I do? Well, he's riding home on the subway. So I assume he's in one of the boroughs because he's going in under the tunnel in the subway. And most of the time the lights are off out there, so you don't see, the leaky tunnels you're actually going through. But the lights are on here for some maintenance on the track. They were paused, and he could look out of his subway car and he sees that there's a red light up there, meaning it's too dangerous to proceed. And he goes, yeah, red light means too dangerous to proceed. Eventually, the light turns green, the subway gets going again, and he goes, yeah, green is the color of it's safe. And that was the origin of Green Lantern, which is you see that green light, you will always know that no matter how bad things were, right up until the time it showed up, now you're safe, which I think is a wonderful idea for what the essence of superheroics is. I wish people would remember that. But anyway, the green light was a symbol that it's okay now. The gaudy costume is a symbol. It's like, and it should stand out. The point about uniforms and battle used to be to stand out. Your gaudy red uniform as opposed to the gaudy blue uniform of the opposition. But then it changed, of course, to battlefield tactics, blending in, not making a target of yourself.
Sure.
But the superheroics harkens back to that. You dress big, you dress gaudy, you make a statement, because the one thing you want, once you show up on the field of battle, all those civilians that are getting the shit pounded out of them, pardon my French, they're going to be okay now, because all the villains are now going to turn their attention to you, and you want their attention on you. You want to take it off of them. You take the heat off of them. So yes, you dress like some kind of clown, if that's what it is, but you dress to get their attention.
Man, you had some 80s attention getting outfits for sure, Bill. The original Morningstar outfit is one of the wildest female costumes. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to do something that was asymmetrical. There's something a little disturbing about. I had just recently read Shogun, and so like everyone in the world at the time, I was briefly infatuated with medieval Japanese culture.
Uh-huh.
And one thing you learn from Shogun, and then if you dig a little deeper, you find that like pottery making and things like that, is that they believe this idea that nothing should be perfect, that you'll always make sure everything has at least one flaw in it. And so that attitude of like, lack of symmetry, we find disturbing on a subterranean level.
Yeah.
So I gave her a lack of symmetry just because, and it is like you can't put your finger on why, but that's just odd enough to be disturbing, and I wanted her to have that effect.
It worked. The characters, just to bring it full circle back to the elementals here, and what you said about them needing to be strong characters. That's what I loved so much about the book. The unique identities of each one of them, and Jeanette in particular, like she is that strong female character that like they want to see in the movies now. But I found it was a more realistic kind of grounded version of that, in that she was tough as nails, a cop,
Yeah,
who worked out hard and tried to keep her edge. I thought it was a really great characterization.
oh well, thank you. To speak about the uniforms again, the costumes.
Yeah.
One of the problems I have with team books wherein they're all in basically the same uniform, which people make a good argument. It's like, come on, their team is like, uniform means uniformity.
Sure.
But in small unit tactics, where on a battlefield, different weapons are used, but basically any human being has the same range of abilities as another. So them, one in particular standing out, not as important. In the hurly-burly of a big pitched battle, where you're operating as a team, you need to be able to know at a glance, oh, that's that person, let's say Vortex. Now, because of his gaudy uniform, which is unlike any other there, I know exactly what he could do, as opposed to this person who has a completely different ability set.
Yeah.
So if you're running things tactically, you want each individual team member to stand out like that. Now, in practice, those battles aren't written that way because, for the most part, they're written by people who've never been in a fist fight, much less, a battle.
Right.
But that can be learned. And anyway, that's my justification for all of that.
And I thought it was interesting too, that if you looked at the characters, like in terms of their size and how they look, and which ones were really probably the most powerful, you'd say probably Becky first, and then maybe Jeanette and Jeff, and then like Morningstar was pretty useless. I mean, not Morningstar, but Monolith was pretty useless in almost every battle that I remember him being in.
Yeah, team's got to have a strong guy, but physical strength is not, it's like, yeah, okay. But yeah, Becky who can control, I mean, to a certain extent, it's how much did they explore what they could do with their powers. And she did the most exploring. And she expanded her power set greatly. Vortex probably next in line. I mean, just imagine.
Yeah,
he
right.
figured it out, and if we'd kept going, he would hardly be seen to be doing anything, because eventually he figures out, all this flying around and trying to blow things out of the sky and this and that and putting myself in danger. No, I'm going to hang back, and suddenly everyone on the opposing field is going to find themselves unable to breathe because I've just removed the air from their lungs. Eventually, they all would have figured out what else to do with this stuff. Because Monolith did not actually control the element he just sort of, gathered around him as armor. He could do the least. At some point, Jeanette would have explored what she could do.
What was Tommy, were you thinking of maybe like earthquake type powers or earth control powers or anything beyond just the rocky form?
Initially, but when I started realizing we're going to go a different way with him, where what he's going to explore is, we exist because of all this magic. Let's start looking into that, because that's the
Yes.
why explore the periphery when you can explore the power behind what's going on there. So that's why he eventually would have come into Saker's camp.
And then trapped in that prepubescent body as well.
Yeah, poor guy.
And yet being the smartest of them all. I thought just there were so many great touches in the characters outside of just their powers and their abilities. It really was about the characters.
Smartest, potentially, but not necessarily wisest. I mean, wisdom is accumulated through experience, and I'm sorry, no kid, they can be smart as a whip, but they're not wise.
Right.
And we would have explored that too.
Huh. Interesting. Well, Bill, we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Is there anything here that you have left you want to plug?
Yeah, let me finish promoting. All right, so Batman Bigby. Then we're going to have 12 issues of Fables. And then someday we're going to have my take on what I thought would be a good Christmas issue. That's from DC. Prose-wise, I am writing novels. I have a few available at Amazon right now that I hope you will pick up. One is called Hammer of the Gods, and it's a modern fantasy, urban fantasy, and it's all about a half fae, half human, half breed who works as a mercenary, and through weird situations, he comes into possession of Thor's hammer, and everyone wants it. And everyone's willing to, as a matter of fact, the client gives it to him because it's like, I'm tired of people, trying to kill me to get it. So you deal with it. Everyone's trying to get it from him. His friends, his enemies, the U.S. government, fallen gods, both courts, the Seelie and the Unseelie court of fairy. So it's all about him trying to stay alive long enough he's given a specific mission, which I don't want to deal with right now, or I don't want to give away. And does he come through? It's called Hammer of the Gods. In the same fictional universe is called The Remarkable Mr. Finn, also currently available in your Amazon and Kindle and what have you. And Mr. Finn is a talking ape, and lots of lycanthropy exists in this world. So everyone assumes he's like, a were-human, an ape that can turn into a human, or vice versa. But no, he's from a weird place. As a matter of fact, the weird place he's from is, ever hear this is a little more lighthearted than Hammer of the Gods, but ever hear the old saying that if you had an infinite number of monkeys typing randomly, immortal monkeys typing randomly, they would eventually accidentally type the complete works of Shakespeare?
Sure.
Well, he's the one that did it. He was working for the Infinite Chimp Company in a different world, and he's the one that eventually randomly typed the complete works of Shakespeare, for which they threw him out of the business, the bureaucracy, because the one thing a bureaucracy can't have is a reason to, all right, we're done, let's shut the bureaucracy down. So they penalize him. They penalize him because between Twelfth Night and Much Ado About Nothing, he randomly typed 4 Jacqueline Suzanne novels. And they said, that's the penalty, you're out of here. So he made his way to our world because, well, he had to quit. He didn't get fired. He's like, you can just start again. We're not going to count this one. But in protest, he said, no, I succeeded, so I quit. He makes his way to our world, and because you can't spend an infinite amount of time randomly typing without getting a pattern sense off the charts, he finds he makes a pretty good detective because of those skills. And he becomes a talking chimpanzee detective. He's got a fun companion. He lives in Spokane, Washington, and he runs afoul of some bad werewolf packs that are up to no good, and he gets dragged into the middle of it. That's The Remarkable Mr. Finn, and it takes place in the same fictional universe as Hammer of the Gods. It's a universe where everything we believe exists. Unlike most books that premise this idea, it's not a secret underground thing. This is all out. We have a Bureau of Lycanthropy. We have, every university has its lycanthropologist that studies the wolf packs, and we have vampires, but they're no danger because eventually they realize, we're vampires. We can do heart surgery in 1/10 of the time that anyone else can, which means we succeed more often. We are the best ballet performers. We're, this and that. And because we don't show up on film, no one can steal, our performances and stuff like that. So they're rich. It's like you would have to be the stupidest vampire in the world not to be filthy rich. So they no longer, they have very strict dietary laws, and they no longer prey on humankind. The wolves, they're supposed to be civilized too, but they're having a little more trouble because they're savage little beasties. Anything that exists, in our belief, exists in this world. Also, there's just another rancor, and this is only dimly related to the other two books in the sense that it's kind of a world removed, but this is a place where you can travel from one dimension. This is what happened to my Edgar Rice Burroughs dream novel, which is like all of his characters. I wanted someday to discover that cave that would whisk me to Mars, where I wanted to get the sword Excalibur handed to me from a woman lifting it up out of the lake. I wanted to discover the glory road, where it's like I'm going to go be the hero in this world that needs me desperately. It never happened to me, even though me and my friend Dwayne Westmore had a club about we were always looking for clues. We wanted to find where that cave was in Arizona, and we wanted to, travel to England and find where Arthur's buried. So it never happened, but I did join the army and have a few adventures that way. I never did fight in a battle in the army, by the way. I don't want to misrepresent myself, but I did have to make a traffic stop on a main battle tank, which was a little weird because I had no idea what we'd do if it wouldn't pull over when we hit the blue lights. I mean, it was a tank. We were a little car.
But Bill, the books that you're putting out, do you have a publisher? Are you self-publishing?
Self-publishing. It's called Mount Pelion, but that's just a cover for me. Anyway, this is a guy that goes to another world of warrior elves and fantasy and dragons and this, but it's in a mercenary rifle company, a modern mercenary rifle company, and they hold the northern border that keeps the elvish kingdoms from the human kingdoms, because those people hate each other. I mean, with a passion. And elves don't even get to become adults until they've killed their first enemy in battle. So just another rancor. And he has these dreams of being John Carter, and he ends up just a private in a mercenary rifle company. Those 3 books are out now. There's others. There's the sequel to Hammer of the Gods coming. There's a sequel to Mr. Finn, which this one is called Extraordinary Mr. Finn. He gets another case. We're going to have sequels to Just Another Rancor, as the character there works his way up the ranks of the company, much like Bernard Cornwell did with his character Sharp, who rose from an enlisted man to a colonel during the Napoleonic Wars. So we're going to see, Private Under, who Johnny Under is the character. We're going to see Sergeant Under. We're going to see Lieutenant Under, etc. Unless he dies. Super Team is in the same world as Hammer of the Gods. It's a group of sorcery types that get together to say, comics are, let's use our abilities together. Beowulf is a favorite character of mine. I've done a few stories, and I'm doing the complete Beowulf. That's almost out, where There's a couple of novellas and short stories all about the character from old. Beowulf, as we know, was a great hero. He died killing a dragon that was plaguing his kingdom. He killed the dragon killed him. But as everyone knows, if they read their Siegfried, the way to become immortal in that mythology is to bathe yourself in dragon's blood. And he was covered in a lot of it when he died. So it turns out that about 100 years after they gave him a Viking funeral and sunk his burned body in the lake, he regenerated. And lying there at the lake with fish eating you for 100 years, he was a little bit mad for about the next 100 years. But then he got better, and now he's a licensed private hero, which is, you got to get your license. You can't be heroic without a license in this world. So that's coming out. All of those are coming out, and I'm going to keep doing novels in this world. So please look at those. If I would have been,
they can find the best place to find those is Amazon.
Amazon, you can get a book, like a printed book if you want it, or you can get a Kindle.
Any chance of comics based in this universe, or
maybe
those of us who love pictures?
What I think I might do is I've done these books, prose books, because I can spin a good yarn quickly enough to get it out there. And my business plan here is to constantly make a little bit of money off of a lot of books. But someday I want to start doing more deluxe, fully illustrated versions of these, because I think the old days, of illustrated books, it's a nice time for those to come back. What else?
And you're planning to illustrate them yourself.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. That's what we want to see more Willing. But Bill, we want to see.
Well, no one else knows what they look like, so yeah.
We want to see Bill Willingham comics, more comics like drawn and written by Bill Willingham, the cartoonist.
Someday.
When are we gonna see that?
I will tell you that the next comic that I've written and drawn and lettered and inked, the first 5 pages of that already exist. So don't look for it soon, though. I'm slow.
I mean, is that using your own characters and it's all there?
Yeah, it's new stuff.
Great.
I want to do a hat trick. I want to, Elementals hit big at the right time. And for a while, it was like one of the things. Outside of Marvel and DC, it was the superhero book. Then Fables hit big, and I had a long period in between Elementals and Fables where no one knew me, and I was barely scraping by, living in a van for a while, down by the river. So I had 2 unqualified successes in my career. I'd like to get at least 3. Do the hat trick.
Yeah.
So
You got another one.
One more comic thing where everyone says this is the thing you got to get. We'll see. That's an egotistical thing to want, but we'll see.
I think you can pull it off, Bill. You've created so many works that I love. And I mean, I'm going to urge people to go out there and read Pantheon too, because if you liked Bill Willingham's superhero stuff, this is some of the best stuff ever. And there was even a whole universe kind of planned and semi-created around that Pantheon stuff. I remember the Blackheart character and stuff, and it sort of fizzled out.
Well, it didn't fizzle out. It was designed as a 13-issue thing, and it came to its end.
But no, there were the other series like the Blackheart mini.
Oh, there were spin-offs and things like that. Yeah, we did. We did that along the way. But the core thing was always intended to be the 13 issues. 13 being a very lucky number for a superhero book.
Well, I'm going to ask everybody to go out, pick that up. Go look for Elementals, for goodness sake, if you can find it. I mean, I think you could find them in a lot of different places. The only one that's ever been really expensive is that first appearance and maybe the number 1, but you can get the other books. go pick it up. Speaking of Neil Adams, sorry.
Speaking of Neil Adams, I got to tell you something. I have a friend. His name is Brad Tomte. I'm going to name him and shame him. Because his initials are Brad Allen Tomte, his initials are Bat. So he decided, I mean, he didn't come by it naturally. He just decided growing up, I'm going to be a Batman fan. It's like, I chose this because of my initials. And so he was the world's biggest Batman fan, but didn't know who Neil Adams was.
Oh, no.
And they're like, Brad, how can you be a Batman fan and not know Neil Adams?
Yeah, that's sad.
So I haul him over to Neil Adams' table. Now, Neil Adams is a verbose fellow, like, you know, depending on the mood you get him in, he can be hell fellow well met. Brad takes one look at his table. He's always got this huge table set up with everything he's done, and, you know, he's got just tons of stuff to sell. He looks down and goes, "Oh, you're the skate man dude." That's how he knew Neil Adams. So, yeah.
I love it.
He did too. He's just like, you didn't know anything about me except Skate Man. And then, yeah, they were stuck. I moved on, and hours later, Brad was still talking to the guy about this and that. Anyway, he has since learned how Neil Adams saved Batman from obscurity.
I mean, even something as lame as Skate Man, Neil sold it. That's a
cool yeah, he's Neil Adams. I mean, come on. Terrible logo though. I hate it. But
I love the comic. I buy every copy of it that I ever find.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I buy every copy. So
wow.
I have about maybe 20 copies now, something like that. And
why?
I just can't get enough of it. I just can't get enough Skate Man.
You know why? I'll tell you why. You ever love a book so much that you're a little upset that you already own it? You kind of want to keep buying it again, even though it's not going to be a different story. It's going to be the same Shogun every time, but you just love the book so much. Yeah, I can understand that. Other people realize, though, that they're not going to get a different story and just buying the same Skate Man over and over again.
Well, it's, there's nuances every time. And I love that the cover is also the splash page, but with even a better, the greatest dialogue ever. Hands off, jerkhole. The party's over. We're forming a union. My foot in your face. No friend to the workers. Our Skate Man. But Bill, you are a friend. Thank you for coming on the show and taking time out. I know you're with all those projects you're talking about.
Well, yes, please support my work so that I've managed to do 40 years without having to get a legitimate job. I'm not fit to work anymore, other than spinning stories. If you give me money, I will tell you some fun lies. That's the deal.
Okay. Bill, stick around just a second. I want to thank everybody out there for watching this, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Well, that was the great Bill Willingham. Wasn't he cool? That was a really long conversation. It went a lot longer than either of us initially intended it to. But I think we got to some really great stuff. I really got to learn some new stuff about the Elementals, about maybe where he was planning to go. And hey, how about Bill's proclamation that the Elementals are public domain? That's right. Andrew Rev hasn't been protecting that copyright that he allegedly shystered Bill out of. So please, let's get it going. Let's bring back the Elementals. Let's fill in all those gaps and make an amazing fan project. Wouldn't that be amazing? At least I think it would. You got one customer right here ready to go. So go check out the Elementals. Go read Fables. Go check out Batman versus Big B and all the new projects Bill's got coming out. Pretty excited about that Christmas project he's got coming out from DC. He was dropping hints about. So go check out all of Bill's great projects, especially the Elementals. Come back here, and we'll see you, next time.